Hello, my friends. It is I, Rick Hollis, and I have with me one Mr. Tim Henwood. Hello, Tim.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm good. That's all the people behind the camera that you can't see there. Yep, settle down, folks, and we'll get to you soon. Mate, I've been wanting to chat to you for a while, actually. I'm going to say the first time I ever crossed paths with you was in about 1999 or 2000. I was working at CFM on the Gold Coast, CFM and Gold FM, and you came in with the Superjesus, and you did a boardroom performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you
A
were playing with
lot of
them
those,
around
but
then?
I do remember CFM well.
You do? So that was
When
really
Gravity
cool.
was coming out.
That was really cool working there because I was working in production and be working away and the phones, it'll go bing. Oh, if you'd like to see the Superjesus, they're doing a boardroom performance in 10 minutes. And we drop tools and come down. And I feel really bad, dude. I'm going to say sorry to you right now because when it came to questions, I was like, where's the other guy? And I felt so bad afterwards because, I
know that he'd left the band.
Yeah, I didn't know that he'd left. His name escapes me now. And you were the ring-in. But since then, man, I've seen you playing with, in no particular order, the Androids. I've seen you with Jon Stevens and Noiseworks. I haven't seen you play with Noiseworks yet, but I've seen you with them. I've seen you around with Suzie Quatro. I saw you fronting Palace of the King, opening for Baby Animals. So, as I said to you before, when I was talking to Pete Thorne, and I had him on here, I said, man, it just tells me that you're an easy guy to hang out with, and that you're always on time and your gear always works, etc. Just for the listeners, mate, is there anybody else I'm missing out on that they may have heard of? Rogue Traders. You play for the Rogue Traders. Who else am I missing?
Right. There's lots of other ones, but there you know the key ones are there. You know, I actually started my touring career as a teenager playing for James Rain.
Wow.
So my first ever tour was playing guitar with James, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
That was a great opportunity. Yeah, and then just ever since then, I've been on the road and sometimes in my own bands like the Androids, the Superjesus, Rogue Traders, Palace of the King, but sometimes playing for other people like Suzie and Jon and, Noiseworks. I'm basically there because sadly Stewie Fraser passed away. And I play with Jon, so that kind of makes sense. So, it's been a constant whirlwind of touring, and I love it. I love it.
Awesome. So, man, I want to get to know a bit more about your background. And I always start off these chats by asking people what sparked the fire for music for you, for guitars and music.
I don't really know, but I did know that I loved guitar from when I was very young, 4 or 5. I really was always asking my mum for guitar lessons because no one in the house played guitar. And I knew that I wanted to do it. So I had little guitars, like plastic ones and ukuleles, like a lot of kids. But I was very keen to learn. And so it sort of started there where Mum took me to a local guitar shop, it was at the back of a music store, and asked them to teach me. And they were like, the teacher said, "Oh, look, he's too young. You have to wait till he gets older." And I kept hassling her. And so eventually he said, "Well, bring him in and we'll see." And then thankfully I made some kind of impression on him, and he ended up being my guitar teacher until I was, it was probably 10 years he was my guitar teacher.
Yeah, right.
Which was amazing, but it was all classical because, again, my parents not playing guitar and me just knowing I wanted to play guitar but not knowing why. It was just, well, this is what you do. You learn classical, and then later on you might become someone who plays in bands, but there wasn't even on our radar. So I learned classical guitar for 10 years. And obviously there's that transition, where I get into Kiss and AC/DC and Rose Tattoo and The Angels and then Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and then and I'm listening to these songs going, I really want to do that. And then you'll love this. My mum loved Yngwie Malmsteen, right? And so to the Trilogy album, she's saying, yeah, but that just sounds like what you do, except with distortion and rock and roll drums. And I said, yeah, it kind of is, Mum. It's classical guitar, but crazy distortion. It was like it all started, you know. Eventually, I realised I couldn't play like Yngwie, but I loved Angus and Ace, and I loved all of that stuff. So I switched from my classical teacher to another teacher, who was Ray Smith, who was a very renowned, great teacher who taught a lot of great guitarists from Australia. And he was my teacher until I stopped learning, probably, when I was in my late teens, maybe. I think I stopped learning from him.
Yeah. So when you were doing the classical guitar lessons, was there things that you picked up on that in doing that you're using now in the rock world, or did it more come from
absolutely.
when you were playing with Ray?
No, it was Ray was great because he's a freak of nature. I hope he sees this one day, actually, because he was amazing. He never picked up a guitar in all of the years I learned from him, which was, I don't know, a long time, years. He never picked up a guitar.
Wow.
But I could bring an Eddie Van Halen solo in and say, I'd really love to learn this. And he'd sit there and listen to it once and write it out. And then you say, okay, so he's using this mode and this scale, and this is what he's doing, and I'll show you how, so I need you to do this and this. But he never picked up a guitar.
Wow.
He still is. He's incredible. I don't know how anyway, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there. Maybe Simon Hosford could do that, because I love Hossy, and he and I play together a lot. We've done theatre shows together. But in terms of directly relating things to the classical lessons, which was before Ray, it was still to this day, I look at my hand making a chord, and it's so clean, and I look at it and I go, that's what you try to tell kids when you're trying to teach them a chord.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at my hand and go, it's from the classical lessons. It was,
right.
In fact, it used to be a bit too perfect, because then someone would say to me, oh, you can play Foxy Lady by putting your thumb over the top of the neck and doing the bass note like Jimi Hendrix did. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. Your thumb in the middle of the neck, and you've got to have your fingers all in the right spots.
Yeah.
And then so I had to loosen up eventually, but there was a transition. I remember this a school teacher came to find me one day at school. He said, oh, we've got electives. What are you doing? And I said, oh, I don't know. I'm thinking about doing this cooking. And he said, well, why don't you come? We'll do a guitar elective. I know you love playing guitar because you're always in the music room playing with the drums with you on the guitar. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to. And he said, yeah, well, come on. And then I started playing chords. I didn't know how to play the pentatonic blues scale yet.
Yeah.
Playing classical, trying to learn Kiss songs. And he's like, man, I've never seen someone who can play chords so perfectly with their left hand, And I was like, really? I'm just looking at my hand going, that's just what you do when you play classical.
Yep.
But he was, bizarrely, I reckon we probably had 5 sessions of this elective. And I learned so much from him, because suddenly I was listening to Kiss and AC/DC and going, oh, hang on a minute, I know what he's doing. It's what the guy showed me, the pentatonic blues scale. I wish I could remember his name, because I still have Ibanez Les Paul off him. I still have it. When I was 15, it was my first legitimate electric guitar.
Yep.
Because I was, progressing from the classical to the electric, to the rock and roll stuff. And I had audition cheapy guitar from Kmart, or I think it was Kmart, where my auntie worked. But I couldn't, it wouldn't stay in tune. The pickups were terrible. And I was playing in a band by this point, and the guitar just wasn't up to it. So I used to have to keep borrowing guitars from my cousin Kevin, who was older than me and really, really good to me. And then I had to have another guitar. So this guy who taught me to pentatonic blues scale. He sold me this Ibanez Les Paul. Later on, I discover all those early Rose Tattoo records and Aussie rock records, they were made with Strauss amps and Ibanez Les Pauls because
Wow.
they couldn't afford Gibsons and Marshalls. And in hindsight, those Ibanez Les Pauls and the Strauss amps are fantastic.
Yeah,
They're
the
still
lawsuit
like,
era, as they call it, right?
and here's this, right? So I'm on tour now with Suzie Quatro. We've got today off, which is why I had to make today our chat. I'm sorry about messing with
You're right,
your
mate.
schedule.
No, not at all.
But I've got that Ibanez Les Paul on the road with me. I've got the Gibson Les Paul and the Ibanez Les Paul as my spare. And I look at it and I go, wow, I've had that guitar since I was 15. I was touching it last night while Suzie was doing her bass solo, just going, I can't believe I still got this guitar.
Is it a
It's a
plywood
great
one?
guitar.
Is it plywood? No.
No. It's got a laminated top,
Yeah.
but it's not a plywood guitar. And it's only a bolt-on.
Yep.
It sounds unreal. It's got the Super 70s pickups. It used to be my C guitar, because with the Superjesus, we had a drop D guitar and a drop C guitar, which is C, G, and the rest were normal.
Yeah, right.
And so, because Chris Tennant, who was the original guitarist who we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
the original guitarist from the Superjesus, obviously he left the band and I joined the band. We had to play a lot of material from Sumo. And so a lot of the songs from Sumo were in this C tuning that Chris, I don't know if he invented it, but Chris, I'd never heard of it until I was trying to figure out what Chris had done on that first record. Because when we first went on tour, obviously we were playing a lot of Sumo songs as well as the album I made with the band, which was Jet Age. And so I even started writing songs in that tuning, which is C, G, and normal. And then I had to have a C guitar, and then a normal drop D guitar, and then you had to have a spare C guitar and a normal drop D guitar. And so you suddenly had to have 4 guitars on the road. And so the Ibanez became my main C guitar because it sounded unreal. So it's not like I grew up and put, I've got bloody 69 gold top and the Les Paul I'm using with Suzie. And this Ibanez is a great Les Paul. And it looks, you'll love this, Rick. The thing I loved about it most, it's beaten up now, but thanks to Scotty Kingman from Horsehead, I'll explain that in a minute. But the guitar just looks exactly the same as the Smoker guitar from Ace Frehley.
Oh, really?
Back in the Love Gun era.
Yep.
He's got that poster with him, like the guitar and the smoke's coming out.
Yep.
It looks the same. It's the same sort of finish on it and everything. And I just remember as a kid just going, it looks just like Ace's guitar. It's so wrapped. But it got a bit beaten up because Scotty Kingman, when we were all growing up in Melbourne together, the Horsehead boys were a bit older than me, but Scotty Kingman and I were sort of both vying for the Horsehead gig. I don't know if you've heard of Horsehead, Rick.
I have. Yep.
Unreal band from the 90s.
Yep.
All great friends of mine. I still keep in touch with them. And Pam McKenzie, the main guitarist, songwriter in Horsehead, was a massive hero of mine when I was first starting to play around Melbourne as a teenager. I just used to love his guitar playing, and my band would support his band, and then I'd go to his house and learn from him. And so Scott and I were sort of vying for this gig in Horsehead for a while. In hindsight, I was too young, and Scotty was a rock star, a little bit older than me. But then when it came time to sort of start touring, Scotty didn't have much equipment. And I had my Ibanez Les Paul, which became his spare, because I didn't need it. I had a few other guitars, and I was fully into Stevie Ray Vaughan at that point.
Yeah.
So I sort of I bought myself a Strat as soon as I started making money when I was about 18, I bought a Strat, and I've still got it now. It's a great guitar, and the Ibanez Les Paul was kind of sitting there not being used at that point. This is very early 90s. So I borrowed it to Scott. He was using it as a spare, and he had my JCM 800, my original first Marshall I ever got, which is the classic era 80s JCM 800, best sounding amp ever. Didn't work with the Strat. until going all over the Johnny here. Sorry. When I figured out, I spoke to the guy, Bill Andrews was the guy that worked on my amps, and he was an old school roadie, worked for Australian Crawl and Mondo Rock, and I was a kid, and like my dad used to have to take me there because I was too young to have my license. And Ray, my guitar teacher, said, "If you need something done to your amp, or your guitars or whatever, take it to Bill." So I had ended up getting a couple of other amps, a couple of JMPs,
Yep.
late 60s ones,
Mm-hmm.
and they sound unreal with the Strat. And I just wanted to sound like Kevin Borich or Stevie Ray Vaughan or Diesel, I was loving that sound. So the JCM 800 sitting there doing nothing. And Scott didn't have an amp. So I was like, there you go. So on the first couple of Horsehead records, it's my JCM 800, and he was using my Ibanez Les Paul as his spare. And then, but by the time I got the Les Paul back and the amp back, the vinyl had peeled off the amp because he left it in his car in a 40-degree day.
Oh no!
And he left the guitar leaning on an old par can, and it burnt a big hole in the top. And blah blah blah. They're just, and I'm not having a go at Scott. I still love him. He's still like a brother, and he plays in the Screaming Jets these days, and he's brilliant. But it was just funny. By the time I got him back, they were barely recognisable, but they had more rock mojo than ever, Rick.
I totally get it.
In the Scotty Kingman, he sends it back with mojo, baby.
Yep. I've got just a 5-string Music Man OLP bass back there, and I lent it to a mate who wears a big thumb ring, and he chunked all the back of the neck with that when in the time he had it. But exactly, I got it back and went, yeah, it's got mojo now, hadn't it?
Yeah, but that's annoying mojo. Back of the neck is annoying. I had a guy who was our roadie, names, but he used to wear a thumb ring, and then he's cleaning the neck constantly after the gigs, like cleaning the strings, and the rings just go up the back of the neck. I've still got guitars that have got those marks on them now for that reason.
Yeah. That is annoying, the back of the neck thing.
It is, because you feel it,
You feel it,
like,
yeah. So
anywhere except there.
Yeah. So my mate, when he did that was more up on the side. I didn't feel it, but I got a Friedman guitar a couple of years ago, and I had a mate come over, and he had a play, and immediately he put it down against the corner of a table right on the bit and dented the back of the neck right where I'm playing when I'm soloing. And I'm thinking to myself, fucking hell, every time I play there, I'm thinking of you, brother. It's a nice little reminder.
That's so annoying.
I ended up sanding it out.
You got it out. Good on you. Yeah. I just, it's sort of hard with war wounds on guitars, isn't it? Because you kind of go, it's part of the history of the guitar. My guitars, a few weeks ago, we had a gig at, there's a place in Melbourne or out of Melbourne in the West called Werribee Mansion. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
They have a one electric day festival there on the lawns of the mansion.
Yep.
It's like this rich family used to own all Werribee, basically was a farm, their farm, and they had a proper mansion, and servants' quarters and all this, and stables and everything. So, but the mansion's still there. It's beautiful. And so anyway, this day we did a Noiseworks gig there, and Danny Spencer and I were actually both playing. Danny plays with Jimmy Barnes, as you probably know. So Danny and I were actually both doing this Noiseworks gig because John was like, let's just get you both in to do this gig. All right. But we get there and it's so windy. It was really, really bad wind. And a tree fell down right beside my car. And we're sitting there going, God. And the whole the side of the stage on either side, they usually have the big canvas. So you can't see where the roadies are and all their stuff is and everything while we're on stage. You can't see that. Keeps it nice and clean from the front.
Yep.
But all the wind blew the guitar rack with all our guitars over, like all the way down, clunk. And they all got this dint in the same spot. Right. Yeah. Thankfully, This was after sound check. So thankfully, Danny's Les Paul was in its individual case and not in the rack.
Yep.
But now we've both got these straps with this mark in the same spot on them. Craziness. But a war wound, you know. I'll always remember that story.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump back a little bit. You said you had the Magic JCM 800 as your first serious amp.
Yeah.
What were you using leading up to that? Did you just have little practice amps and stuff, or did you get a good amp fairly early on in the piece?
Well, I remember my brother driving me to buy that JCM 800 and the speaker cab, which I still have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got the blonde mesh, like the one behind you. So that I bought that from one of the guys in Hush. It was after Hush, because it was in the 80s. So they weren't on the road anymore, and I didn't know who Hush were, right? And I was too young to drive, and thankfully my brother takes me over there to buy this head and cabinet from this guy in St Kilda. And we'll go up to his flat, and my brother helps me. I know I've saved up my money. I give him the cash. My brother helps me take it back down to the car. And as we're leaving, he goes, "You know who that guy was?" I go, "No." And he goes, "He's the guy from Hush." It wasn't Les. I don't know who the other guy was. I can't remember his name. I've met him because I did the Countdown tour playing with James Rain. You know, wasn't the 25th anniversary, but the Countdown tour, the first one.
Yep.
Anyway, I should have said something to him. I forgot all about that. But apparently everyone's got a speaker cab or a head or something that once belonged to Hush because they used to have the wall of amps, you know.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
You know those ones. It's like when you during the 90s, in the early 90s, when you get to a gig and the Marshall amp you had just sounded like shit. Someone would say, "Oh, yeah, the Jets have been out on the road with all these Marshalls and they've just hammered them all." And so there was like bad-sounding Marshalls for years because the Screaming Jets had just ruined them all by rocking too hard and having them too loud.
Yep.
And that doesn't happen anymore, thankfully.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was probably, I think maybe when I got that amp, I might have been 17. Before that, I should have probably, I don't know why, I think I was a bit of a snob. I thought it has to be a Marshall.
Yeah.
So I didn't buy Strauss amp. Whereas the other guy, Tony Switek, was the other guy. He's a little bit older than me, only a year or two. And he had an Ibanez Les Paul, the black one.
Yep.
And the Strauss head and cabinet. I had the Ibanez Les Paul and this Python amp. You search them now, you can't even find them. It was like the head and the cab, two speakers all in one.
Yep.
And it had like a GT stripe on it.
Cool.
I tried to do, because it was amps. It's a lot of money when you're a kid. So I thought I was buying a good amp, and I bought a JC 60 watt. Not like the JC 120, Jazz Chorus 120.
Yep.
I bought a Jazz Chorus 60. But playing in a band, we played a couple of Metallica songs in our set, and Rose Tattoo and AC/DC, plus our own songs. That's the music I was into. I was never going to get that sound out of a JC 60. However, naive, I didn't understand what I was doing. So, and in hindsight, I should have kept it because it'd be a great amp for sessions or in the studio now. But I didn't keep it. I had the Python and my little Boss Turbo Overdrive, and then by the time I got the Marshall, I was on my way. So
yeah,
it was, and it kind of all coincided. I was doing gigs. I was about 12 in footy clubs. The first time I played in a pub I might have been 14, but I was always using someone else's amp. I never used the Python at a gig. The Python was just for rehearsals. We used to rehearse in a scout hall back in the western suburbs of Melbourne. It's unreal.
Wow. So I was the same. I was 14 when I started playing around in pubs. I was really lucky, man. Some guys that I went to high school with, they were all a couple of years older than me, and we started a band.
Yeah.
And that became a group called the Pumpernickels. And, man, for a time there, you couldn't drive anywhere on the coast and not see Pumpernickel stickers on cars. And we were a really good band at a young age. And it's...
Well,
I'm lucky that I did my 10,000 hours, as they talk about, to get to a proficiency level with those guys.
Guys, being that little bit older,
Yeah.
always helped. Like my first band was with my brother's mates, and my brother's 4 years older than me.
Yep.
They're all 18, 14. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So they've
Yep.
got the licenses.
Yep.
They're booking rehearsal rooms. They're letting me use their amps. And they're driving me to gigs. And, I used to have probably the same for you. I don't know if the rules are the same. Were you in Queensland when you were
Yeah.
growing up?
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know if the rules are the same in Queensland, but in Victoria, you could go into a 18 establishment, but you've got to have a guardian, like a legal guardian. It can't just be brother's mate. So my brother, he would have been there anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. But he used to have to come to the gigs. Otherwise, I wasn't allowed to do the gig. So the venue owners would always be like, we're not having that kid in here unless he's got a legal guardian who's willing to take responsibility for him.
Yep.
And so that would have to be my brother. And they I don't know, with you, Queensland, back then, Queensland was probably a bit weird because it was like, you're younger than me. That wasn't a Joby Yockey time, was it? Because that was pretty heavy. Like
It
back
was.
then, the police were pretty heavy in Queensland.
It could have been, man. I'm actually, I'll be 52 this year.
Oh, okay. Well, you're not that much young. A couple of years younger than me.
Yeah. So it was 88 when I started playing with the guys.
Yep.
I'm not aware of any rules or regulations, but the only thing that I have a laugh about all the time is we opened for weddings, parties, anything, and we had to do 2 sets, and I'm a 14-year-old kid, and you could smoke in venues at the time, and man, that's the last place I wanted to be, in this smoky-filled room. I went outside in between our sets, and they wouldn't let me back in. I remember going up to the bouncer, and he's like, sorry, mate, this nightclub, 18 only. I'm in the band. Sure, you're in the band. And he wouldn't let me in, and eventually a roadie comes out going, there he is, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, oh, they won't let me in.
I can imagine. Hang out in the beer garden.
Yeah.
Like they'd make me go out and just hang out in the beer garden with my brother.
Yep.
Which my brother thought was hilarious.
Yeah. So the band that you're in when you were 14, were you playing originals back then, or was that just purely a cover band?
Yeah.
Originals back then?
No, it was originals, but we also did covers as well to fill the set out.
Yep.
Because we used to do a lot of footy club gigs. You'd have to do a couple of sets. And so we would do, Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath and Metallica and AC/DC and Rose Tattoo songs and all that, which is great stuff to cut your teeth on.
Oh, absolutely.
And as well as our own songs, because we probably only had, 10 of our own songs. We didn't have enough to do a gig. And we'd play a lot of backyard, I'd love to glorify it and make it sound like the backyard parties and street parties that Van Halen did, but we used to do a lot of them, but I don't think it was anything like those ones. Can you imagine going to some guy's party in Pasadena and having David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen rock up to play? Now that would be a party, and a keg. That would be a party. But so we did a lot of those kind of things. We had to have a lot more songs.
Yeah. So were you opening? Did you get many slots opening for other name bands at the time in that group?
No, not a lot. We did just a few pub gigs of our own, or Battle of the Bands, or things like that. And then from there, quickly progressed to a band of mine where I started meeting Cam McKenzie and the guys that became Horsehead and all that stuff. It wasn't really long after that I started playing with James Rain and so but we were on the circuit around Melbourne mainly doing supports for every. Do you remember Jimmy the Human and Spectre 7?
I knew of Jimmy the Human. I'm aware that Jimmy plays for the Jets now.
Right. Well, Jimmy the Human and Spectre 7 were huge in Melbourne. Every weekend you could go and see them and there'd be 1,000 people at the gig.
Wow.
And they put on an unreal, great show. Josie Jason was the other guitarist, and bongo and Diddy keys, and it was just an incredible band and just really entertaining. And Jimmy's always been fantastic. Um, so it was, yeah, that was kind of the heyday of the pub rock thing going on in Melbourne. So my band at the time, which was called Delta Moon Drivers, I was starting to fully get into Stevie Ray Vaughan, and it became kind of like this living color cross with Stevie Ray Vaughan. Was quite avant-garde, really. And
Cool.
we would do support heaps of bands around the Corner Hotel and all these iconic places. And then,
Yeah.
like I said, before you know it, I'm on the road and playing with James and going all over the country. And I've never been. I think the first time I ever went on a plane was when I went on tour with James. It's craziness.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you started playing with James, and how did you get the gig?
I was 19. So it was. What had happened was Cam Mackenzie and Scott Kingman, both the guys from Horsehead, and Scott obviously from the Jets. And Cam now plays with Mark Seymour. If anyone's interested in seeing Cam play, he's brilliant. Those guys being the or not next generation, but older than me, had already done quite a lot. Scott had already played with the Divinals, so those guys were in the scene like knew a lot more people. And so James was looking for a guitarist, long story short, and Cam suggested to James and his manager, well, you should check this kid out, Tim. He's good. Cam and I knew each other quite well by then. We'd already started doing gigs together, and I was thrown around as a potential member of Horsehead and blah, blah, blah. So James didn't really want to audition anyone. He just wanted Cam to join his band. But Cam wanted to focus on Horsehead. And so Cam's on the road just doing it, saying, you've got to find someone. I need to go. I've got to go to America and make an album with Horsehead. So James begrudgingly held auditions. And thankfully, I made an impression on him because then I got a phone call. They were on tour and they said, okay, you want the gig, kid? And I said, yeah, I do. And they sent me a desk tape. And I sat in my bedroom at mum and dad's house for, I don't know how long it was. I might have had 2 weeks. And I just went over and over it. Every day,
Wow.
I played the entire gig. It was second nature.
Yep.
And I got flown up your way. The first sound check was, I think it was Twin Towns. Yeah. Anyway, my first gig. What's the gig just out of Brisbane on the river? There's a gig. I can't remember what it's called. It's still a gig.
The River
That was my first
Stage?
gig with Joan.
Not
No,
the River
no, no.
Stage?
Little.
No,
It was like a pub.
a pub. Hmm.
Whatever. I'll remember it later.
Yep.
But I still remember. I go there now, and I go, "Wow, I did my first gig with James here," and I remember playing that first gig. I've done two sound checks with him, and I did that gig. I was on stage, and the gig started, and I just went, "No, I know this." I wasn't overly nervous. I was a bit nervous, as you would be,
Yeah.
but they was, you got John Watson on the drums, and you got James Ryan singing. You're going to be fine. You could totally not play, and those guys would just drive it home like a semi trailer.
Yep.
So I was kind of like just riding the wave of these brilliant musicians, Mark Gray on the bass, and just playing, going, it's in me. I knew it because I'd played it so much.
Yep.
I just knew it inside out. And the stage roadie, Mark, he had a bit of paper on it, and he ran up in front of me and down at the wedges, he held up this sign that said, "What nerves?" And it was like, it was really nice. Like he was going, "You're nailing it, man." It was really nice. But that was just an incredible experience. Unfortunately, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, Rick, but you after playing with guys like Watson on the drums, I went back to my band who I'd been playing with and doing all these supports around Melbourne with Jimmy and 21 Guns and all these other bands, Josie, and went, oh, my band's not very good. Like these guys aren't really as accomplished as the guys I've been playing with, and I've had to catch up to these older guys and be as good as them. Otherwise, I would have been sacked.
Yep.
And I felt like I was step back, and I just didn't know what to do. So that was the end of the band, basically. I started trying to put another band together with new musicians, older guys who were more like those guys, you know, and it evolved into what my career became.
I totally get that, man. As I said, I lucked into my first band being some really good musicians, and a big part of that was our drummer, who I used to see at school playing and just going, how the fuck can you do that? He wasn't a double kick guy, but he'd do some amazing things just with a single kick.
Well, there you
but
go.
he was just on. He was just on, man. And ever since then, I'm really picky about my drummers, and a lot of the time I'll play filling in with this band, that band, and I'm just looking at the drummer going, oh, dude, you're trying to play the fancy shit, but you're just not on. And it wasn't until we had a reunion gig of the Pumpernickels probably about 5 years ago, and he hadn't touched his drums in years, and we played, and I was watching the video of it with our old bass player, and it's like, we were spoiled, man, with old Mukey on the drums there. He was, listen to him there. He hasn't played in years, but he's just on.
Still got it. Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean,
were you playing your own stuff as well as covers, or just
much like you, we were doing original stuff, but fleshing it out with covers.
Yeah.
So cover wise, we were kind of more into the Australian surf rock thing, like the Sunny Boys.
Awesome.
Screaming Tribesmen, stuff like that. So I mentioned about playing with Weddings, Parties, Anything, and we were spun out because their lead guitarist was Richard Bergman from the Sunny Boys. And being a 14-year-old kid backstage, just like, no way, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So what came next after James Rain?
So after James, I was back in town trying to put together my own band. And then I started getting called to do things because I'd played with James. People, you know, playing with someone like James is like playing with someone like Jimmy Barnes, where it's an instant recognition of you must be okay if you've played with him.
Yep.
It would have been the same with her if you had played with the Divinals. You wouldn't be. Everyone knows you're okay. So I started getting more and more calls, and then it was after that I was still trying to put my own band together and doing heaps of gigs around Melbourne. Started touring around Australia more with my own bands, and then my newer band became Plasticine, and we started having a lot of success on Triple J. And then after doing that for a while and doing a lot of stuff, back in those days, it sounds like the ancient times, but back in the 90s, I would do 8 gigs a week in Melbourne.
Wow.
So much work.
Yep.
It was incredible. And you'd run from here to there and back there, and you'd do an early spot somewhere acoustic, and then you go to the SB front bar and play in the front bar doing your own set, and then you go to the Metro late at night and finish at 5 a.m. Then you'd get up the next day and you'd do it all again. It was easy to do 8 gigs a week. So it was very, very busy. Then after I've done sort of a few sort of semi-profile things in this time, and then Mark Seymour asked me to join his band after Hunters and Collectors finished up.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while. For years, I made a record with him. His second solo record. Yep. Became really good mates with Barry Palmer, who was and is the guitarist in Hunters and Collectors. He's great, unreal guitarist, great record producer, great songwriter. He and I wrote a lot of songs together.
Yeah.
So it was really good. So so it sort of progressed along that way.
Cool. Now you mentioned then about there being able to play that many times a week. Has things changed there? Because it used to be that here we could play different venues every weekend and not play the same place twice in months, because all the surf clubs would have bands. Blink-182 Blink 182 played the Surfers Paradise Surf Club back in the 90s. And we'd do all those.
That's awesome.
There was just venues everywhere. But then the Pokies came in and just killed it. And is it the same in Melbourne?
Yeah, it's not as Tim Friedman would say, like the Pokies, but it wasn't like there's still a lot of gigs around town. You can hustle and find gigs. It's not as good as it was, because a lot of ALH venues have changed their entertainment, the way they do entertainment. A lot of them have bands out in the burbs, but in town, a lot of not only ALH, but a lot of the alcohol companies and gambling companies, taken over. Maybe they've put pokies in, or maybe they've just decided we're going to have young DJs and instead of music. It certainly doesn't have it's not as vibrant as it was back then, but it's still fine. There's still plenty of work if you want to, like I had lunch yesterday. My good mate, Johnny Salerno, who plays drums with John and Pete Murray, and he and I play in Suzie Quatro's band together. We were having lunch with some friends of ours down there in St Kilda because we played at the Enmore with Suzie last night. And as we're having lunch, we're talking to, one of our friends had a gig out in the suburbs last night. And then the other one had a gig just up the road in St Kilda in a cafe. So there's work out there. It's pretty good, Melbourne. It's always been, the most vibrant city musically. And I think that you probably agree with me, Rick. Ultimately, it's not just, Melbourne is more of a creative city. I think it's just the climate sort of leans into it a bit more.
Sure.
You've we've got a big chunk of the year where you're not really, it's not great to be outside, and people just sort of drives people to be a bit more creative and doing things inside and going to a pub and staying inside a pub. You know what I mean? I think it's just a natural selection,
Yeah. It's the opposite here. Like, I got to say, because we'll have really beautiful days, and it's like, it's too nice to stay inside and rehearse and stuff.
Exactly.
Let's go get amongst it. And
exactly.
Yeah.
When I was there recently, when you and I were chatting, I didn't realise you were on the Gold Coast, and then I'm like, we're just the Twin Towns, But so my day became, I won't even leave that. Other than rugging up, if you understand how cold it gets down here, but it gets really cold.
Yep.
In winter, like where you've got ice on your windscreen.
Yep.
And so I'll rug up and take the dog for a walk in the morning. My wife and I'll go for a walk.
Yep.
And then I won't go out again. I won't going out again. It's horrible. So then I'm like, what am I going to do? And I'll sit in front of the computer and I'll write a song and I'll do this and I'll do that. And it's a whole other thing. Whereas when I'm up your way, I have breakfast at the hotel, go for a walk, get some exercise. I'm hot and sweaty now. Just got my board shorts on. I'll just go to the beach and go for a dip because the water's beautiful.
Yeah.
Go in the water.
Yeah.
Get out of the water, go back to the hotel. I'll go for a sauna. Before you know it, the whole day's gone.
Absolutely.
I've done nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm healthy. And my mental health is good. So, and these are important things. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I hear this about people in New York. A lot of who write books and musicians to a lesser extent. A lot of those people are in New York because you're kind of stuck inside and you're going to make do. Your brain wants to do something.
Yeah.
But I was going in the water every day up your way thinking, I could do this. Because look, we're in the middle of summer down here. The water is freezing, like it's come out of a freezer. You go to the beach, because I live near the beach.
Yeah.
You go to the beach and like it hurts. You go, your feet hurt. I don't know if you get that, if you understand what I'm talking about, but man.
I've experienced that going up in the hinterland here and dipping my feet into the water, fresh out of the beach here. No, even sometimes in winter, you stick your foot in the water and it's warmer in the water than it is out of the water.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that happens here too. But because we're not, as in, you know, obviously you're closer to the equator, and we're closer to Antarctica, and so you've got, those we get the wind from Antarctica as
Yeah.
well as the wind from the middle of Australia. So you get this thing where that's why we get all this crazy weather,
Yeah.
And we've
Yeah.
got all that free cold water coming past Tassie, across Bass Strait to our shores.
Yeah.
Beautiful. We do get autumn here. Finally, the water will warm up a little bit, and it's quite nice.
Yep.
But it's only for a few weeks,
Sure.
and then it's back to putting the thermal wetsuit on if you're going in.
Yep.
But as you know, like, it's really good for you. That cold water is really good for you.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
being
Yeah.
brave enough to get in there, God.
Funny story, man. You mentioned before about playing on the countdown 25th anniversary or whatever. So I play in a group called Absolutely 80s, which gets around down your way with Scott Garn, Brian Mannix, etc. I'm the Queensland guitar player.
Yeah, I know all those guys, of course.
Yeah. So they did the Countdown Reloaded, I think it was called, where it was Gavin Wood's Countdown last year at Twin Towns. And the night before, Scott's like, "Hey, boys, I'll get you to suit up, nice dinner jackets and everything." And I've been a really skinny guy all my life, man. It was only about 3 years ago that I put on 20 kilos and grew a beard. A lot of people don't recognize me. So none of my wardrobe fit me after that. And I've messaged Scott back and I've said, "Dude, I don't have."
Skinny.
Hey? I was super skinny, man.
You look totally good now.
I'm normal weight now, yeah. And it was till I got my late 40s that I actually grew into my body. But so I've had to message Scott back and say, "Mate, I don't have any clothes like that fit me." And he said, "Well, what do you wear when you go out for dinner or something?" I said, "Mate, I live in Queensland." You're hard up getting me to put on a pair of jeans, like a lot of the time gigs, shorts kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny. How was the gig? Was the gig?
It was a cool gig. Cool gig. It always is with those guys. It was more a spin out having Gavin Wood be a part of the experience and sitting backstage having dinner and hearing him. Because Wilbur Wild was on one side, and I had Gavin Wood there, and they were exchanging stories about hey it's Saturday and stuff like that. And just Gavin Wood's voice as he was talking was just like, you were the voiceover guy, and this is weird hearing your voice come out. You're that guy, You'd experience that all the time with the people you play with.
It is a bit that way. Sometimes I have to scratch myself. I was standing on stage looking at Suzie thinking, what am I doing? I'm on stage with Suzie. What's going on here?
Yep.
And she has a whole part of her show where she talks about that have happened in her career and milestones, and they're flashing pictures up on the back screen. It's like a retrospective of her whole career, this tour we're on.
Yeah.
And then so you're looking up there and she's talking about it, and there's this photo of 19-year-old Suzie in a leather jumpsuit, and you're like, wow. And then you look over and you go, there she is. Wow. It's just like, it's pretty amazing. She is incredible.
How did you score the gig with her?
Well, originally, what that Suzie would travel with her English band everywhere around the world, but she would come to Australia and spend months here, and the band had to come with her, and it didn't make a lot of sense. So at some point, she's decided, or her manager or the promoter of a tour or whatever has said, well, there's really good musicians in Australia. I'm sure we could find a good band here for you. So they put a band together around her, and that became the band that does the rest of the world. So she's got her English band, and they do, Europe and England, because they're playing most weekends.
Sure.
And then the Australian band has been to Canada, I think Japan, maybe America, I'm not sure, but mainly Australia. So that when she comes over and does a Red Hot Summer tour, or this tour we're doing at the moment, she's got people who live in Australia, and she just comes over and we all make sure we know the show inside out. Again, like we were talking about before, for 2 weeks before the tour started, I used to go out there. My computer I've had a little battery operated practice amp, and I would play her, which I programmed into a playlist, and
Yep.
I'd just play the whole set. I'd stand up and I'd just go through the whole set. So by the time I get to the first rehearsal with her, we all do it.
Yep.
It just comes out. There's not really much that needs tweaking.
Yep.
Then we get on tour and we're all smooth. So the first time I played with her was a few years ago now. Might have been 2019, 2018, before the pandemic. So it was, we'd kind of, I'd been sent the set. They'd all done it before, because when they first put the Australian band together, I wasn't in it. It was a great friend of mine, Pete Wanless, who was friends with my cousin, Kevin, who was a big help for me when I was a kid, right? So I used to play in the garage with Kevin and Pete, and we'd play Cold Gin by Kiss and AC/DC songs. They'd showed me bits and pieces, and Pete had one of those wine red Les Pauls. Is it Burgundy? What are they called?
I'm not sure. Probably. Yeah, I'm
You know
not
what
that
I
big.
mean.
I'm more
You know,
a Fender guy than Gibson.
Right. Well, anyway, I remember the Les Paul. And so, ironically, as we got older, Pete used to play in Josie Jason's band, Josie Jason and the Argonauts, which happened after she left Jimmy the Human Inspector 7. Jimmy went three-piece, Josie put a band together. Pete was in it. I was like, oh, Pete. Like, we knew each other from when I was a kid and he was younger. And then Pete was in the band with Suzie originally, which was put together by Nat Allison, who's the other guitarist in Suzie's band.
Yeah.
And Nat and I have been friends since back in the day when we were both very young. Nat's a bit younger than me. And so they were doing it, and then Pete decided he wanted to finish up. So this is how it happened. So Nat called me and said, Pete wants to lead Suzie's band. Would you be interested? And I said, yes, I'm in.
Absolutely.
So then, yeah. So I've been doing it ever since. And it's, it's just pretty amazing. So that's how that gig came about.
Yep.
But to my point, so I ran her the first time. I ran her set. I got it under my fingers, which took a few days. Then I just ran it every day. But that was for a month. Just ran it every day. It was part of my day. Run Susie's set. Got to the first rehearsal. Never met her before.
Mm-hmm.
Got to the first rehearsal. We ran the set once. And she said, okay, that's great. I'll see you at the first gig. And I went, one rehearsal? One run through?
Yep.
And then I said, I guess she was happy, right? And everyone, yep. And I would have liked to run it again. But we didn't run it again. And it was fine. The gig was fine. I guess she picked up on the fact that I had it in me. I wasn't just holding on for dear life. It was in me. And Johnny and Paul and Nat, the other members of Susie's band, they all do the same thing. We get to the first rehearsal, we make sure we know it.
Yep. Man, like with the absolutely 80s up here, our drummer lives in Toowoomba. I'm down here at the keyboard players in Brisbane. So we're lucky to get a rehearsal at all. There's been shows where we don't. We just show up at sound check. Because there's a revolving cast of 80s people in that, we might just run over the tops and tails of songs, how they like to start and finish them. And it's just, hope you did your homework. Let's go. So, yeah, I totally
That's
get
right.
it, man.
And, well, you're obviously there because you did do your homework. Otherwise, Scott wouldn't call you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He goes, I know these guys will do their homework, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that actually often the keyboard player and I will exchange calls, and when we get a call for a gig, and it's just like, dude, is there any more gigs? Have I been given the arse yet? Did I not cut it last time? But he keeps calling. He keeps calling.
Right.
Yeah. So how about some of the other bands? Like,
you...
how about like Rogue Traders, man? How did that come about? Were you an original member of Rogue Traders?
Yeah. So what happened with the Rogue Traders was, this is how things work, as you know. So when I was with James, James Rain on my first tour, the tour manager was a guy called Smiley, Patrick Cleary, whose nickname is Smiley. And Smiley and I kept in touch, we got along great. And then eventually after the Superjesus, we had a record deal with the Androids, which when we had that big hit song "Do It" with Madonna, which I'm sure I probably saw you in at the radio station around that same time as well. And the Rogue Traders were two DJs.
Yep.
Which was James, who's still in the band and really the figurehead of the band now, Jamie Appleby or James Ash, and Steve. They were two DJs, and they had a hit record with that remix of One of My Kind, the INXS song.
Oh yeah.
And we were signed to the same label. So then they come into the label one day, and Smiley's like, Tim, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we've got this hit song. He's like, yeah, right, you do too. We've got a hit song with this. And then we're keeping in touch. And then one day we were doing a gig with INXS. It was after Michael had died, but Jon Stevens was front. So this is like, it's amazing how all these things connect.
Yeah.
Jon Stevens was fronting INXS, and they were doing a big kind of playing on a football oval in a regional city. And we were supporting, and so was Rogue Traders as a DJ act.
Okay.
And James started talking to me saying, we're thinking about making a band record. And he actually asked me to come in and audition to be the singer.
Oh, wow.
And there were a few songs around at the time that he thought this is after Androids was sort of slowing down at this point. I was thinking maybe I'm at a loose end, I don't know. And then he started talking to me about maybe being the singer in the Rogue Traders. We tried it, didn't work. Obviously, in hindsight, as if that was ever going to work when you had Nat later on as an option. They found Nat. They finished making this band record and called me and said, do you want to come on tour? We've made this kind of band record, which was the Voodoo Child. That's when that became a hit.
Yep.
And so then I find myself in another big band. After the Androids, we'd been all around the world, and we'd been to England, and we played on Top of the Pops and had this big hit. I'm sort of in a lull because I don't know, because the label went broke, and even though all the money they made from us almost saved them, didn't quite. So we were kind of like at a bit of a loose end. So they asked me if I'd come on tour with them. So before you know it, I find myself, I'm in the band. And we did that tour for a long time. Then we started making the next Rogue Traders record. And then I got another record deal for the Androids with Sony. So then I had to leave the Rogue Traders to focus on that. And we had another song that did well on radio called Whole Lot of Love, but the record wasn't a hit. And in classic Sony fashion, because the first single wasn't like a smash hit, they sort of lost the vibe.
Yeah.
But by then it was too late because Danny Spencer, my good mate from Jimmy Barnes' band, was playing with the Rogue Traders. It's amazing how all these things connect. So Smiley still manages the Rogue Traders to this day.
Yeah.
We got the original lineup back together years ago, and we've started playing again, which is great. I love it. So that's how the Rogue Traders story came about. Wow. We actually made a record with the Rogue Traders, one record without Nat on Sony, with Melinda Jackson, who now sings backing vocals in James Rain's band.
Yeah.
And that didn't quite work. So that had to be put to bed, and yeah, it's amazing how you've got to try these things.
Man, I noticed years ago back in the 90s going to see different artists, Australian artists, and just looking at all the guys in the bands and going, hang on, you were playing for such and such. And so I do see that. It's all very, very connected, isn't it? And it's one of those things, once you're in and people know you're reliable, you show up on time, you're good to hang out with.
You get along with them. That's exactly right. It's the same with you. I mean, look at what happened with Brian Mannix. Like during the pandemic, Brian and I made a record together. It was Brian Mannix and the Androids, and we made this record called Hit Me, which was a whole heap of hit songs that we thought this would be a great concept for a record. And then as we came out of the pandemic, we started doing gigs as Brian Mannix and the Androids, We had a single out, which was a cover of Rebel Yell, the Billy Idol song. And so it's just amazing how it all kind of, goes like this,
And the classic thing is, man, when he moved up here, I was playing guitar for him.
Yep.
So I was playing your parts.
Exactly.
Yeah. So small
Yeah,
world, man.
he's a killer. He's so good.
Yeah.
And I think it's perfect for him living up there. You see sitting on his balcony overlooking the water and getting the sunlight, the warm weather. I think especially, when you're living on your own, like the warm weather is a big positive, I think. Being stuck in your house in winter in Melbourne on your own, not ideal.
So, mate, you're doing a lot of production and stuff as well now. What got you into production? Because I do a similar thing. Like, if you were to see this is one big home studio that everyone spins out at.
Fantastic.
And I mentioned that I was working in production at CFM when you came in. How did you get into the production thing?
Well, it started out as just a necessity. I was always curious about it. And like a lot of us, I had a 4-track, a little Tascam 244 4-track when I was a kid. And I got pretty good at it. And then I started programming up one of those little Boss drum machines and demoing songs. And then other people started saying, "Oh, could you do a demo for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I could do that." So I did that. I wasn't charging anyone anything.
Yep.
And then eventually it moved into the studio before Pro Tools, before computers. I didn't know how to run a tape machine.
Yep.
So I used to have to pay. I used to go into the studios. There's some great studios in Melbourne. Supportive of me, and they would let me come in and record at night, and I'd get an engineer who could come in at night with me, and we'd spend all night recording, and then get out in the morning so that they could have their proper session, after that.
Yep.
But I could never run the tape machine, so I was stuck having to pay someone. Then when things went to Pro Tools, I started thinking, I really need to learn how to do this, so I don't have to pay these guys all the time.
Yep.
And so I just started teaching myself while I was in the studio, and then eventually progressed to the point where I could record my own music. That's really what the goal was.
Yep.
And then as you know, the more you do something, the better you get at it. Like anything. When people say, "Oh, it's so hard," it's like, well, the only way to get good at it is to do something a lot.
Yeah.
And so you do it a lot, you get better at it. And then suddenly someone hears one of your songs that you've demoed up and goes, "Oh," like record companies would say to me, "Oh, look, I really like your demos for the new album. Would you be interested in recording some stuff for me for this band or that band or this artist?" I go, "Oh, yeah." And then that's how it sort of just word of mouth started happening. Yeah, just more and more. And now I've got this great studio in Geelong, Medici, that I'm allowed to access anytime I want to use it. It's really beautiful SSL desk and all the Neves and Neumanns and LA2As and everything you might want. And I take bands in there all the time. A couple of young bands I've just recorded recently. I love it. It's great, as you know, when it's not just your stuff and it's someone else's, it's a whole other feeling that you get, a whole other satisfaction that you get.
It is, isn't it? And you can be a bit more subjective with it. When you're working on your own songs, you're so close to it that you don't see the obvious things. And I find that if I'm producing other people's stuff, I'll get them to quickly do a guide vocal to a click track that will build everything around. And on first listen, I just know it's like, you need to drop 2 bars there to anticipate when you're jumping there. And
there you go. Yeah.
Depending on who the artist is, I find the better the artist, the more open they are to that kind of feedback. Whereas guys who are kind of not that good will look at you sideways like, but it goes like this. And it's like, you've heard it hundreds of times. I'm hearing it for the first time.
Yeah,
and
I
think
agree.
It'll add more attention if you do this and do that.
Yeah.
And
you can't be defensive, but that's the thing, like you say, right? Even if you're just sitting down with a guitar to write a song with someone, the person who's not defensive is always the brilliant person.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, is that what you think? Well, let's try it. And they're open. You can tell they're open.
Yeah.
Or they'll let you run with something for a little while.
Yeah.
I'm loving that. Or, okay, that's not really working for me. But they're always the ones that are really talented and really good.
Yeah. I was lucky. One of my best mates, he was a bit too shy to be playing in bands. He ended up playing in a Tool tribute band, which was really cool. But he just had a really good set of ears on him. He would just sit there with headphones on, analyzing music. And as I started doing bands, it wasn't real nice the way he'd do it. He'd say to me, I'd play back my rough mixes. He'd go, "Do you really want your snare to sound shit like that?" And I'm like, oh,
wow.
Why? How does that sound shit? Oh, it's all ringy and blah, blah, blah. Listen to this. And it's like, oh, okay, better do something about that. So, it was tough loving from one of my mates.
Yeah, tough love. He was being cruel to be kind.
Yeah,
However, he could have said the same thing without saying it the way he said it, and it would have achieved the same goal.
Yeah. But I was very thankful that I had someone around me.
In the end, sometimes those people are, like as we both know, Rick, it takes all kinds of people for the world to go around and to run smoothly. If everyone was the same as me, it wouldn't be a good place. And if everyone was the same as you, it wouldn't be a good place.
Yeah.
We all need each other, and we need those people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, the gig that I'm really jealous of you is Noiseworks. When I started playing guitar, I did that thing where, for the first few months, everyone plays, some Shadows like Apache or something, and then you move on to, maybe some Dire Straits or something like that. But then the first songs that I was working out for myself were like Bryan Adams' Reckless album. Keith Scott's playing was
great album.
So melodic, so the right part for the song, and within grasp of a beginner to work out. But then Noiseworks was on the radio and just learning some of...
very, actually very similar guitarist, really. How's that guitar solo in Run to You? Such a great guitar solo.
Absolutely.
And then, basically every guitar solo Stewie Fraser ever played is just a brilliant little piece on its own. Really
Absolutely.
Good. That's good for me as a guitarist who's, done a lot of stuff and getting older now. It's great for me to find myself, after the pandemic, when Jon asked me to play in his band, which was a great story because I was sitting there going, what am I going to do? I don't have many gigs. I had like 3 gigs in my calendar for the rest of the year. And then Jon and his manager sent me an email saying, "Oh, we got these 100 gigs here. Do you want to do them?" And I went, yep. That was simple as that. And then I'm learning Stewie's guitar parts, thinking, oh, this is great for me because sometimes he'll be in a different position than I would have been normally, and I'm going, I didn't realize I could play in B here, but he knew the neck so well.
Sure,
it's really great, really great, and it's the second time that's happened to me with Stewie Fraser because the first time back actually before Mark Seymour, but after James Rain, I was in Nick Barker's band. So after Nick Barker and the Reptiles finished and Nick went solo, I was in that band. So we made a record called Happy Man, and we toured. It was a Triple J feature album, and Nick's such a brilliant songwriter. So Stewie had played on the first 2 singles because they'd made these sort of demo / first songs for the album. And then they put the band together, and then we made the rest of the album. So I'm learning Stewie's. There was this song called "I Heard So Much About You," ooh, 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 and it's got all this great Stewie Fraser guitar playing on it. And I'm learning it, going, "Oh, this is great." So it's like the second time I've gone through this thing with Chet, which is Stewie's nickname for those who don't know. It was learning his stuff on all the Noiseworks songs.
Yep.
And then it progressed from Jon's solo band, which I've been doing for years now, into Noiseworks, because when they first put Noiseworks back together, it was a couple of years ago, Jack Jones was doing it, who's obviously an incredible musician and a great friend of mine. So Jack was doing it, and then it became apparent that Jack was Southern Sons were back together. Jack got too busy to be doing both, lots of clashing and stuff. So they just said, well, can you do it? Because you're already playing with Jon. So if Jon's not playing, you're not playing, which means you could play with Noiseworks. And I went, I'd love to do it. It would be an honor. So I've been doing the
the Noiseworks thing since then. So
That's
which has
awesome.
been the last couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's brilliant gig. And Stewie's just a brilliant guitar player.
I want to pick your brains about how you're getting Stewie's sounds, because he had such an identifiable sound. But I'm just going to mention, you mentioned Jack Irwin. I'm guitar teching for him this weekend.
Are you?
Yeah, they're starting their new
gig.
tour up here in Queensland. I'm doing 2 shows, Friday and Saturday, so I'm looking forward to that. I messaged him already, and you said, Jack, he sends the voice messages to everybody, right? So I got the
he's so funny, isn't he?
Yeah, that's his thing.
Tell him I said hello. That'd be great.
I'll do that.
Yeah,
so I'm looking forward to teching for him.
Show, Southern Sons did a show supporting Jon at the Palais here in Melbourne. Well, it's probably a year ago or so, and they were brilliant. Really good show it was.
Awesome.
I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? That guy could get up and sing the phone book and play anything he wanted to, and it'd sound brilliant.
It's funny, man. When I had Jason Tong from Headfirst Amps on here last week, he was saying, because Jack, as you know, lives like 3-hour drive out of Melbourne. So when he came in to get some work done on an old Marshall, he said, "Man, can I just hang for the day? It's a bit hard for me to drive home and everything." And he said he just sat around listening to him play guitar all day while he was working on his vintage Marshalls, and he was just like,
amazing.
How's the touch this guy has? That's amazing.
Yeah, he's incredible, isn't he? And that voice.
Yeah. So, I'm looking forward to that one. He said he's bringing a bigger rig. The last time he was up, actually, it wasn't the last time, but a couple of years ago, he was up here with, what are they called? The Fabulous Caprettos.
Oh, the Caprettos.
Yeah. And he's straight up to me after the show. He's like, "Dude, how's my sound? I trust your ears." And I'm like, I could tell you're using a modeler. And this is that thing about guys who are really good. Rather than take offense to that, he's going, what gave it away and how can I fix it?
Yeah, I know.
How can I make it better? And that's that thing we're saying about guys who are good actually welcome feedback, as opposed to wanting you to just tell them how good they are. No, give me feedback. And
yeah.
So what kind of gear are you using to pull off Stewie's sound? Because he had a very distinct sound with a chorus. I don't actually know what he was using in Noiseworks. Was it a...
Stewie's set up on the pedal board side of it was he had the old C2 chorus pedal.
Yep.
And distortion pedal, which I'm not sure if it was in Noiseworks days. I know not long after that he was using a Rat pedal.
Okay.
And then a compressor for the solos. He just the Blue Boss compressor pedal just for the solos.
Yep.
And obviously there's a bit of delay. So that's on the pedal side of it. So I use all of those pedals. I've got a pedal board with a line 6, the green line 6 delay with the 4 buttons on it, the tap tempo.
Yep.
I use that for the delay, and I've got the chorus pedal, and I've actually got 2 Rat pedals, and the compressor pedal as well. And then just that live on the board for others. So I've basically put this board together for Jon's gig.
Yep.
And which includes, how he does the Noiseworks In Excess collection?
Sure. Yep.
I've got to pull the In Excess sounds as well.
Yep.
So I've got this board set up so it does everything. But at the Noiseworks gigs, some of those pedals are redundant, but there's a little bit of wah-wah in Miles and Miles. I've got for the solos, I can go crazy and put the 2 Rat pedals on, but I've got the 2 Rat pedals because one is, I don't use the channels, even though I'm using that Ironheart 120 amp, the one behind you there. I don't use the channels. I set it a nice, warm, clean sound on that.
Yep.
And then because I'll explain why in a minute.
Yep.
And it sounds brilliant. It's a great sounding amp. I get a nice sort of warm, clean. If I hit it hard, looks like Malcolm Young, right? You hit it hard, it distorts more. You hit it gently, it's clean. And that's basically Stewie was that guy. I remember the first rehearsal I had with the guys. They were like, "Wow, it sounds just like Stewie." And I said, "Yeah, well, you guys are basically a '70s band who were successful in the '80s, right? You've all got that '70s mentality." And they were like, "Exactly." So it works really well. So then I use 1 Rat pedal, which doesn't have any volume boost. So the one rat pedal and not only a little bit of distortion. So
Yep.
that'll give me a really good chunky rhythm sound, as if I've switched to the gainy channel on the amp.
Yep.
And then I've got a turbo rat pedal, which just cuts through. It's got like this frequency cut through, and I've got the volume all the way up on that, and that's my lead sound. So sometimes I'll just go straight to that on its own if I don't want the amp to take off. You know, when you let go and the amp just, it's no use to you.
Yeah.
But it's okay if you're just cranking and going hard and you're not going to stop. It's okay. But if you want to be subtle, like the solo in Take Me Back, you can't have that sound because you're going to get feedback between every note.
Sure.
It's going to sound like Magic Dirt. And Magic Dirt are unreal because of that.
Exactly,
sound. That's not Noiseworks, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I've got these two, and then I'll use the compressor sometimes. So I might just have the dirty rhythm sound on, and if I want to have a lead sound that's not bananas, that's just a bit easier for sustain, I'll use the compressor. I'm basically doing what Stewie used to do.
Yep. So you're not using a switcher to switch between the two different rats or anything?
So the reason I don't do that is because, let's say, like on the Red Hot Summer Tour at the moment, I've got my two, the deluxe backline who hire the gear out from Melbourne. They've got specifically for me, thankfully for me, they've got the two Ironheart heads, the 120s, and the cabs. And so I have that in stereo, right? Now, I could use the channel switcher, figure it out, get it sounding right, and use it. Problem is, occasionally you'll get to a gig, and they go, sorry, no one had the Laney heads. You have to use the Marshall. And then I go, and suddenly my world is in turmoil. Even though I know, I'll be fine, I'll wing it, it'll be fine. I know I can't afford to put John off.
Yeah.
I can't afford for John to go, what the hell's going on over there?
Yeah.
So I need it to be as much the same for him and the sound guy as I can at every show.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't use the channel switching, if that makes sense.
Yep.
If we were going on tour for a year and I knew I was going to have my amp all the time, I'd use the channel switching.
Yep.
But I've always been a bit funny about channel switching.
Sure.
I like it to be, being that I love Malcolm and Angus and Kiss and Eddie. I love that they just sound like they've just cranked the amp, dimed the amp when they go for a solo, and then back the volume off when they go back to the rhythm.
Yeah.
And I can do that too. I could do the Quattro gig like that. No brainer. I could just, basically all it is I've got that turbo, not the turbo rat, the other rat pedal on for like 2 times in the whole gig. Other than that, it's just the amp.
Sure.
But I bring the pedal board so that I've got the stage guy's got my loom. I've got my mute pedal with my tuner. I've got that turbo rat pedal, and it's basically just there for the turbo rat, not the turbo rat pedal, the normal rat pedal.
Yeah.
So I don't really need that pedal board. It's a simple gig.
Sure.
The Noiseworks gig's a bit more convoluted, but I just try to, like, it goes back to your conversation with Pete. I like to make sure that things are running smoothly and no one's looking at me going, don't hire this guy again, because he didn't know what was going on stage and his gear kept stuffing him around. And, I hit a channel switch and it goes to the wrong channel, or it goes to, the volume's down on the other channel and I didn't realize, or it's supposed to be up, So that's the reason why. And every now and then I get stuck with an amp, a Marshall amp or a different kind of Laney amp. And I know I can control everything by my pedal board. All I got to do is get a nice, warm, clean sound from the amp.
Yep.
And the rest will take care of itself on the pedal board.
Yeah, right.
I noticed that Jack Housden does the same thing. Jack Housden from the Bad Loves and obviously the Whitlams these days, and he plays with everyone. He's the like the MD of the Big Red Bash and Monday. You've probably worked with him. He's a great guy, old friend of mine from back in the day in Melbourne. So Jack has, his pedal board is his sound.
Yeah.
And he has a Fender Twin, and the Fender Twin is almost just the power amp. It's a clean sound.
Yep.
But it's never just the amp. Whereas I'm all about just the amp if I can, as much as possible.
Yep.
I just like to be able to, like I said, 99% of Quattro's gig, just the amp.
Yep.
Not a lot of the Noiseworks gig, it's just the amp. It's just when you're going for solos and things like that, you need your delays and you need your choruses and you need your distortions to play those Chet parts with the sounds.
Yep. Yep. I just got a little distracted because somebody dropped a message there, and I was about to ask you whether you had ever considered going more of the digital route, so that you could pull off sounds like the record, be able to program delay times and things, as opposed to stopping on foot pedals.
Yeah. I probably sound like a dinosaur, but I've never heard anyone make those things sound as good as an amp. And when people start talking about, but you don't need a speaker cab, and having been the guy that's like, I need the vintage cab with the greenback 25 watts speakers in it. And it sounds different when the vinyl's off it. It sounds different when it's on the floor.
Yeah.
Put the mic here because the reflection off this bright floor at, last night in the Palais, there's a reflective floor and there's an angle on it. You get a different sound out of your amp.
Yeah.
And that's you can, and someone like Jack or Simon Hosford, who are incredible and highly intelligent humans, they will get in there and keep tweaking and keep tweaking and keep tweaking. And I love them for it, and they do a great job. It's you almost can't tell with those guys, but it just doesn't feel, to me, when I'm playing, it doesn't feel the same. And here's the thing, right? So if I've got, there's a Laney IRT Studio.
Yep.
Which is just an amp simulator,
mm-hmm. and
you can pick your cabs and all that sort of stuff. Now, so I am using that. For me on stage, I've got the Ironhearts, right, in stereo.
Yep.
Cranking, sounding unreal, and they're mic'd up, and they go to the front of house guy, and which is Shane Ray. He's brilliant. He gets those, but we carry this IRT Studio around with us. Goes everywhere. Every gig, he gets that sound, and he knows he's going to get it, right?
Sure. Yep.
So I am using it, but he's blending it with the mics.
Yep.
So if he doesn't like the mic sound, sometimes he'll bring it down. And if he does like it, he'll bring it up, and he goes, his best moments are when he's got the mic and the IRT Studio both cranking. He's like, yeah, sounds brilliant. I'm getting everything now.
Yeah.
Just the IRT. Here's my thing, right? If I go up on stage, I generally have a bit of guitar coming back at me in my foldback.
Mm-hmm.
If I go up on stage and I go, I go, no, you're giving me the IRT Studio. I want my amp in the wedges.
Yep.
And the fallback guys go, wow, how did you pick that? And I go, it's a different thing. It's not the same thing.
Yep.
I can tell. You know, Rick, and I don't know if you're pro. I'm not against fractals, and here's the other thing, right? I'm not like a dinosaur who's never used them.
Yep.
Simon Hosford and I did a theatre show in Melbourne, School of Rock, right?
Yep.
And that went for months, and we were using fractals. Sounded great. I had my headphones on. I was using my Framus Diablo, that black one that I use a lot with John. And it's got a Floyd Rose on it. So, because that School of Rock there's a lot of dive bombs and shreddy guitar. Most of the shreddy guitar was Simon Hosford, of course, but I would occasionally do a few bits and pieces, and it sounded great. Like, I was kind of sitting there with my headphones on going, I don't know. I could probably not tell that it was a fractal.
Yep.
For two reasons, I think. One was headphones. As soon as you put that thing through some speakers, the speakers color it. And I just go, right, well, if it's not a Marshall cab or a Laney cab, it's probably not going to sound good to me.
Sure.
And also, the biggest, most key factor is that Simon Hosford was programming it for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because I just go, man, Hossy, can you give me a little bit more gain and a little bit less top end? And he'd come over and he'd sort it for me in 5 seconds.
Yep.
And it was just like, and he's over there and I'm over here, and I'm just looking at him and he's going, yeah, sounds great, you know. So
Yep.
it was. I'm not saying I'm against the technology, but I think that probably the big key factor is that speaker cabinets aren't considered important enough to these guys. As soon as you start putting it through, and Jack carries his wedges around with his proper drivers and everything, and I'm like, yeah, but I've got, you know, like I've got a 60s vintage quad box here in my house, and a 70s vintage one. And if I'm going to the studio, they're what I'm taking.
Sure.
And they sound unbelievable.
Yeah.
I used to get hired by record producers to do records with the proviso that I bring, can you bring that JMP Marshall? Can you bring that 60s cab with the greenbacks? And can you bring that that red Gretsch? And I'd go, no worries. So there was like me and the gear got hired for the gig.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you just answered a question I was going to ask you is, do you have a preference in speaker? And you just said greenbacks, yeah?
Yeah, 25 watt greenbacks.
Yep.
How's this though, right? This is something that blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 2 experiences, which probably anyone watching this is going to go, that blew your mind? What are you? Anyway, 2 instances at Bakehouse in Richmond in Melbourne here. You can hire backline when you rehearse. The backline's like old school stuff that was around when you and I were kids, like, you know, all that Strauss stuff. And they've got all this old school gear that's just kind of works and it's functional. It's fine for the rehearsals.
Yep.
They've got this, I think it's a Music Man speaker cab, very deep, and it's got ports in the back. So it's open at the back. It's a guitar cab.
Yep.
Anyway, my first experience with it was Horsehead were rehearsing at Bakehouse. And I went there I was rehearsing in one of the other rooms, I don't know who with, and I went there into their room to say hello and to have a listen. And Cam Mackenzie was playing through his Marshall through this speaker cab. And I said, man, you got to ask them if they'll sell you that speaker cab. It sounds unbelievable.
Wow.
He said, I know, it sounds great, doesn't it? I said, yeah. And he said, but I don't need another speaker cab. And then he just like very rarely needs a speaker cab like that, because playing with Mark Seymour, they're generally using small amps.
Yep.
So anyway, I loved it. I just thought it blew my mind. And then I said to him, by the way, when you do your gig with Horsehead at the Corner Hotel, I've got a great, reissue Marshall cab with the greenbacks. You should use it. He's like, yeah, I'll use that. And he loved it. Sounded great. I don't know if you remember those reissues, slight diversion. Those reissue Marshall cabs that came around in the early 2000s, they were unreal. They were really the heavy ones with the 25 watt speakers in them.
Yep.
They was like, and I got 4 of the 1960A cabs.
Cool.
They're just fantastic cabs. Anyway, they sound brilliant. So my second experience with that speaker cab that Cam was using in that rehearsal was the other day at rehearsal with Suzie Quatro.
Yeah.
I get to the rehearsal and they hire everything for us. I just bought my Marshall head in and it's that speaker cab. And I went, oh, this will be interesting. I wonder how it sounds.
Yeah.
Put my Marshall into it and it sounded unreal. Here's my thing though, Rick. Going on about specifics about fractals and speaker cabinets and wattage of speakers and greenbacks, and I sound like a dork, right?
Yep.
Oh, what do they call true bypass? That joke, the Jimi Hendrix true bypass joke. Yeah. Anyway, I look at the back. The speakers are 100 watt speakers, 4 of them.
Wow.
It should sound like shit.
Yeah.
It should sound horrible.
Yeah.
But I just went, it sounds really good. Well, to me, it should sound like shit because I like driving the cab.
Yep.
Driving the cab, which is probably why the fractal thing's an issue for me. I like the cab to be moving air so that the speakers are struggling a little bit.
Yep.
And I get warmth that way.
Mm-hmm.
But then I do remember as a kid, probably in the late 80s, I remember trying to figure out what Diesel was using.
Mm-hmm.
And I found this article that he was using, these Damasio HS123 Strat pickups in his Strat.
Mhm.
So I went out and got them and put them in, and he had a
Yep.
TC3 preamp that he had, and you couldn't get them in Australia. So I had to get a guy, the James Rain stage tech, who held the sign up saying
Yeah.
what nerves.
Yeah.
He was in America with Tim Finn, and he bought me 2 of these TC3 preamps, and he brought them back to Australia. And then I had Dave Ulbrich put them in my Strat with my Damasio HS123 pickups. I've still got that Strat wired up that way now, purely because Mark Lizotte had his Strat that way. And at that time, I remember him saying he doesn't, because he was the anti-metal guy and more Australia's Stevie Ray Vaughan at the time.
Yep.
It was he was saying he likes the 75-watt speakers or even the 100-watt speakers because he doesn't want speaker distortion. He wants just the amp distortion.
Sure.
And back then he was using those high-watt, I don't know if it's a 400-watt. Maybe someone who sees this one day can comment. Well, I should ask him, actually. I'm always asking him random questions. I'll email him and say, what pickups did you have in that Telecaster? I just did that like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Because I need to know, because I need to get them, you know. And it was the Bartolini. He had the Bartolini. Was it Bartolini? Yeah. The Bartolini pickups in his Tele. So I went and got the same ones now, because I still listen to those old records of his. Just go, geez. And you see him play now. Oh,
yeah.
So
man,
good.
I got to say, Diesel
sounds
was a big influence on me as well. And
well, it's the perfect age for you and I, you know,
yeah,
like
it was.
a guitar player like that who was just a few years older than us, you know.
Yep. Yep. It was probably
And
about 10 years ago.
looked cool as.
Yep. He had that Strat with the Floyd Rose, and I'm a Strat with a Floyd Rose kind of guy, and it probably stems from back then, and Jack Jones. But I was at a mate's place probably about 10 years ago, and I must admit we maybe had a bit of a smoke of the old gunja, and we're both sitting there, and he put on the Diesel's first album, and I'm sitting there really bent.
Or the Injectors album?
The Injectors.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, fuck, I've ripped this guy off. Like that sounds like me playing rhythm guitar. And then my mate turns to me and he goes, dude, that sounds like you playing guitar. And I'm just like, I was thinking that. And that's how much of an influence. Yeah.
He was massive influence on me. It would have been the same time we both would have been teenagers when that album came out.
Yep.
And it's such a brilliant album.
Absolutely.
And that sound. And I don't know, did you ever get into Jeff Healey?
I didn't. No, I didn't. But I'm totally aware of Jeff and I've heard him. But at the time, I didn't appreciate him for what he was.
At the same time, I saw him play a couple of times in Melbourne. Just a brilliant guitar player. And there's on YouTube, if anyone's watching this, they should go and check it out. Check out, Jeff Healey, Johnny Diesel. That should get you to this. It's like a live recording where either Diesel gets up with Jeff or the other way around, and they're jamming, and oh man, and it's just amazing. It's funny because I remember being on the road with Palace of the King, and to those guys, because they're only in their sort of late 20s now, right? So to those guys, they're like, Diesel's not really on their radar. They don't really think, they're actually like a lot of young crew. They're into the really vintage 60s and 70s guys. And so he wasn't really on their radar. And I said, you got to listen to this. And I said, have you ever heard Jeff Healey? They're like, no, and I'll play a little bit. And funnily, they show me things that I missed from back in the old days, from when I was a kid. It's already old.
Yep.
But I found this YouTube link for them and played it to them. It's the two of them jamming. They're obviously feeding off each other. They're obviously trying to one-up each other, but in a brilliant way. It's like, it's better than, the Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jeff Healey jam that you can see on YouTube. Yep. Better than that.
Wow.
And there's no footage, I don't think. It's just audio. But when you hear Mark play, that guy he's so tasteful and understated on all those records. You listen to him playing with Jeff Healey and you go, wow, the guy's really got some stuff under those. It's like under his fingers. It's like Jack White. Jack White he underplays.
Yep.
But that guy can play. Play.
Yep.
It's just that he doesn't need to do it just because he's making a record. He's like, well, I'm doing what's right for the record.
Yep.
You know,
And that's
why would
a
I do
hard
that?
thing, man. That's a hard thing that I do
yeah.
notice. A lot of people feel the need to show off their chops. And I've been guilty of that, where it's just like, no. Yeah, just
We've all been guilty of it. Yeah.
yeah. Write something in your head and just play that. What suits this? Not, can I play 16th notes or 32nd notes all through this?
But how's the speaking of tone speakers, and because that's what Diesel was talking about, having high wattage speakers, so you didn't get speaker because he didn't want a heavy metal sound. He wanted, because it was late 80s, was transitioning out of hair metal, as you know.
Yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan ruled the world for guitarists at that point, and anyone who was still wanting to play like Motley Crue and Poison was kind of like, it was like, man, you realize that's over, right?
Yeah.
This transition period, and Diesel was well and truly in the forward camp with Stevie Ray Vaughan. He's playing with Jimmy Barnes, and he's like the new Ian Moss. You know, it was amazing. So there was this kind of moment where I realized the other day, I just went, well, there you go. That's what he's talking about. I was just, distortion was coming from the amp, not from the speakers. It sounded great. But back then, for Mark to get distortion out of those high watt amps, they weren't master volume. So I'm pretty sure it was a 400 watt. It was either 400 watt or 200 watt head, right? Was the one that we would hear in the PA if you ever went to a gig.
Yeah.
That was the one hearing in the PA, right? And the reason I say that, because he had one on stage that was pointing at him that was not stupid, crazy volume. That was the kind of, that's his monitor.
Yep.
But the real sound was in the band room backstage.
Wow. Okay.
Ranked. And I remember hearing him say in an interview back then, because I was wondering, man, how's he getting that sound? It sounded like a piano. It sounds so good. And those heavy strings that he used.
Yeah.
He still uses. And it was one of those things where he had this, if you were in the support band or the headline band, you were in the band room sitting there having a drink. There's a high watt amp sitting in the corner. Suddenly, when they went on stage, it was blasting with the mic in front of it. That was the one that was mic'd up.
Wow.
So it's like an amp sim, like my amp, the studio, the IRT studio. It's like that, except it's real. So the front of house guy's always got his sound.
Wow. The funny thing, I had Diesel on a couple of years ago, and
awesome.
I started off like I did with you, asking how they got started and the inspiration. And he said he started off playing the cello. I was
that's right.
surprised by
Cam
that.
McKenzie, my good friend and mentor Cam McKenzie, was the same. And there's a lot of similarities in their playing.
Yeah, right.
It's bizarre. It's like they approach it a certain way. It's like they're more aware. So I didn't play cello, you didn't play cello. So we're playing guitar like a guitarist, right?
Yep.
And it's almost like I find with Mark and Cam, who are both probably, they're two of my favorite guitarists of all time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in those formative years, that's really important. As you know, you never lose that.
Yeah.
You never lose that connection with that mentor or that influence, right?
Yeah.
But I find they approach the bottom end. They approach the bass notes of what they're doing differently because of the cello playing.
Sure.
So it's almost like they're always playing two parts. They're not, but it's almost like they've got two parts in their mind. Oh, the cello would be doing this, or the bass would be doing this, and I'm going to do that. Whereas you and I just do the high register stuff.
Yep.
Or the rhythm chords or whatever, but we're never going, oh, the cello's here. And our minds just, because they would have done that when they were kids. Their minds got structured differently. Their neural pathways were structured differently. It's pretty wild.
It's funny. I actually go to university full time. I'm doing a degree in contemporary music at the moment. Left that late in life. It's been great to actually learn a bit more about music theory and stuff. But more to the point is working with some kids that are really good. I've got a young friend there, and I've started working on some original music with her over the holidays. She's only
Yep.
21, but she's majoring in piano, but can play drums, bass, guitar, you name it. And we were jamming on
Yep.
something. We had a writing session last week, and we thought we're going to write a minor swing, like Django style kind of thing. And
Yep.
we started off, I had some, typical minor 6 kind of chords of that genre. She's on piano and doing great. Then we started jamming. She picked up a bass. And because she understands the music theory from a pianist's point of view, when it came down to minor 7 flat 5 chords where most rock guys would just go, I'm just going to play the root note. She doesn't even play bass, and she's got these tiny little fingers. And I'm listening to the recordings back going, how's you playing all around that with all the right degrees? Then you got your flat 5 and your dominant 7 and stuff there. And it is a different approach if from somebody...
totally.
Yeah.
And I just think they're just thinking about the bottom register more than we are. And it's funny you say that about that was a big help for me with the classical lessons later on. Like I rebelled against it and wanted to just learn rock and roll songs for a long time. And then I fully, as most of us did in that era in the early 90s, got just way into Soundgarden and Nirvana and just wanted to do that. And then, so I was rebelling against theoretical, like the whole thing about Kurt Cobain could play better than he let on, but he was trying to forget what he knew so that he could just be open to anything.
Sure.
It was a beautiful to think. And his main strength was his songwriting,
Yeah.
But, and his amazing voice, and he looked incredible. But anyway, the whole thing is, speaking purely as guitarist, when I was first asked to do the theatre shows again, the first one was Rock of Ages, which was it was a very big theatre show, and it became a movie and everything. That was 2011. I got asked to do that, but they specifically wanted people who were in bands, and preferably well-known bands, and who were going to be on stage for the whole show, dressed in, their hair metal era leather gear and the long hair, and it was a great show to be part of. I loved it.
Yeah, cool.
But I was initially given the music to go over, to read, to learn the show. Then you had to memorize it, then go on stage. And I suddenly went, oh my God, I haven't read music in 10 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I went, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And then I sat down, and it slowly started coming back to me. Yeah. It was all filed away back there in the background. And then that knowledge that I'd learnt, thank God, because after that I did, theatre shows for 10 years where I'd sit in the pit and I'd have to read the music. You can't not read the music. You can't memorize a theatre show. And I just used to sit there, and my mum and dad would come to the theatre shows, and they'd say, oh, that was brilliant. And, we really loved it. And I said, because of you paying for all those guitar lessons and driving me to all those guitar lessons, I'm able to do these theatre shows and pay for my mortgage and support my family. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, we never thought of it that way. Because they were always very supportive of all us kids. But that was a real practical thing. The classical guitar lessons paid off, Yeah. It's pretty wild to think of that. And then the extra thing is, if you don't have a classical background and you're sitting in a pit and you can read, but you're not really great at it, you just lean over to Simon Hosford and you say, mate, what chord is that? And he'll go, it's like this. Yeah. Or Doug DeVries. I did a show with Doug DeVries. I'm not sure if you know who Doug is.
I know that name. How do I know that name?
Oh, mate. Incredible. He's a massively successful session guy. Used to be on the Vizard show back in the day as the guitarist on TV. But you would have heard him on millions of records. Incredible jazz player.
Yep.
But he and I did a Moonshadow, the Cat Stevens theatre show together. Mm-hmm. We got to work with Cat Stevens, which is incredible, and he was really nice and great. To sit down and talk to. He just said, "No, I played it like this." He's not a theoretical musician, but Doug, on the other hand, is incredible. So he, like your average person reads books, Doug reads music.
Wow.
So he said, I love unwinding at home, and I've got a table and a little music stand with a table for my coffee, or a whiskey or whatever he does, and he's got his lamp, and he said, and I just find a book and I pull it out, and these music books are incredible, and just open to a random page and I play it on his classical guitar.
Wow.
And he just says, I love it. It's just so relaxing.
Yep.
That's next level. And how's this, Rick? That guy, Doug, best mates with my classical guitar teacher when I was growing up.
Wow.
Both lived in Williamstown.
That's amazing.
That's
amazing.
I just didn't know that till I was in the pit with him.
Yep. Small world.
Yeah. And I said, he's like, who was your teacher? I said, Bruce Miller. He said, he was my mate when we were growing up in Williamstown, both playing guitar.
Awesome. It's funny you're saying about reading music. I remember being in high school and I had this book, this rock guitar book, and it had Steve Vai had transcribed Eruption.
Yep.
Oh,
wow.
Unfortunately, it was wrong. He played the whole tapping part on the G string, not the B string. Right. So for years, I played it on the G string.
Right.
But I remember going up to our music teacher, sticking the transcription in front of him, and he'd never heard of Van Halen. He was more into classical music and stuff. And he sat at the piano and he played it note perfect first go, just reading it.
Wow.
It's like, wow. And just the guys at university, the music theory teacher, Sam, I see, he had to mark our last assessment we did, which we had to do this transcription of this big thing for all the instruments. And he marked all those, just sight reading. And so I don't do it enough. I had to learn while I was there in a hurry. I got a bit of recognition of prior learning. So when I started, I was in second year for some subjects. I remember talking to one of the guys and saying, mate, am I a bit in over my head? You want me to transcribe this thing? You know I can't read music, right? He said, no, I know you're learning it in the other class. You'll be right in a couple of weeks. So, but you were saying about having to nudge Hosford and saying, what's this chord?
Yeah.
Getting the tips of like people just being able to look at something and go, oh yeah, man, that's a minor seven, it's a major seven.
Bizarre.
Because of the spacing of all the notes and everything. And that really spun me out and was like, oh yeah, okay. They're all on the line. So they're all a third apart and just a different approach to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Doug was great like that too. Like Doug was, it was a great thing about Doug was he wasn't a snob at all, So he knew that I was more of a rock guitarist, and he knew that I'd had hit songs and blah blah blah. But he's like a legitimate, can sit down and read anything. And so sometimes we'd get to a point in the song, and I'd be like, maybe I would have not quite known what was going on, and he'd just look over and put his hand like that, and he'd go just like this, mate. He was unreal. So good that we can all get along sometimes. Sometimes there can be peace in the world.
It is funny, mate. At uni, I'm majoring in production. And after the first term, my friend Brad Hosking is the course coordinator there, and he's Amy Shark's musical director. So anytime you see her on stage, he's the guy playing keyboards or guitar standing behind her.
Awesome.
Another one of my lecturers is the bass player, Omar. I've known Omar since he was a kid. But he asked me to switch to guitar after the first term because he said, mate, I can't just give you high distinctions for everything. Makes the course look bad. And I switched to guitar, and you were saying about some people being really helpful. Quite the opposite there. I had an instant personality clash with the guitar teacher there, who was he's a jazz guy. And you were saying before about, how some guys play with a thumb over the top and everything. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
I was self-taught and I play with my thumb, and he's saying, oh mate, you'll never be able to do these walking bass lines like that. And I would go, oh no, I can. I'd start playing and his
oh no, I can.
Yeah. His comeback to everything, every lesson would just be, oh, just do whatever the fuck you want then, mate. I'm just like, not real appropriate for a lecturer there, mate. So I switched back to yeah, he was. So I switched back to production, and I'm glad because I am learning some things from Brad, who's a fantastic producer himself. But most of the time in the community, we do get along with people, and you share the knowledge, and there is the love out there, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, and you know what? You know what, Rick? I'm just plugging in my laptop, by the way.
You're right, mate.
I find that the guys that are totally cool are the guys that are unreal.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not threatened.
Yep.
There's no drama.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
So I've actually been getting lessons off the music theory teacher there, who I think should be the guitar teacher.
Right.
And so he actually went through the course doing guitar himself. And and he's very open. Like he'll see the way, he'll show, this is, go to a 13. I'm like, well, mate, I actually do it like this with my thumb. And he's like, brilliant. Oh, I've never thought of doing that. I can't do that. Yeah. He's not, well, you can't do that. You'll never be able to do this. So, yeah, it's just different personalities out there. Now, Tim, I wanted to ask you, I usually ask people this, just their approach to the fretboard. And you coming from a classical guitar background, when you're improvising, writing, do you navigate the fretboard as like the caged system or a 3-note per string system? Some people have it all as intervals all over the fretboard, or they might memorize the fretboard on one string or their scales. What's your approach?
Yeah, in my formative days, I actually sat down because I was having moved from classical, which I was that kid that couldn't play without the book.
Yep.
So someone would say, "Oh, play us a song," and I'd say, "Oh, I haven't got my books," and they'd go, "Just play us anything." I go, "I don't know anything. I could only have to read it, right?" So then,
yeah, right.
I develop into starting to learn songs in my first bands and all that stuff, but I'm just playing pentatonic blues scale, right?
Yep.
And then I'm going, every time there's a song in a major key, it's Struggle Town. I'm like, these notes aren't all working. Why are they not working? And then I would start sort of just going, I'm just going to avoid that note. Like when we play this song, or if I'm improvising over a song that I haven't played before and I hit a note, I go, oh, that was not good. I'm not going there again. This is just the process was going through my mind, right?
Yeah.
And then I one day I sat, because Cam McKenzie, I loved his band, which was before Horsehead, called 21 Guns. And I loved Cam's playing. And this is all, that sort of late 80s time where Diesel was huge. Jimmy the Human Inspector 7 were huge down here. Cam was brilliant. And my band was supporting all their bands. And I sat down with Cam one day and he said, yeah, look, you could do the pentatonic blues scale. No problem. But you should learn it everywhere. Just learn it all the way up and all that. So, and I said, what do you mean? He said, well, look at this, and then so he played the next, it was all the shapes, right?
Yep.
So I played it, on the 5th position, and then you move yourself up and he goes, right, you can play those same notes here. And they're all in that scale. It's just they're in a different position. I go, yeah, because all I was thinking was I could do it there.
Yep.
I could do it up 12 frets.
Yep.
And maybe, I was so young, maybe I could do it starting on the A on the 12th fret, for instance, right?
Yep.
And he's going, yeah, but there's all the bits in between. And he showed them to me, and I went, so that sort of opened the neck up to me, just in terms of, and then he said, now, because I had started learning, the major scale, the minor scale, and modes and things like this, but I couldn't put them into, like I'd go into a major scale when someone was playing a Rolling Stones song that was in a major key.
Yep.
And I'd just go, it sounds like shit.
Yeah.
Like I can't play that scale over that song. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound bluesy enough. But I need it to be in the major key. What do I do? And he explained to me, the old, like, if you're in A and your 4th finger is there on the C, right? He just said, so what you got to do is go, well, they're the relatives, right? So, if you want to play in A major, put your 2nd note as the A. So move your whole hand back. Your 4th finger hits the A, right? Now just play the same scale, same shape.
Yep. 3 frets down.
Yeah. I went, what? So that's the major position. He goes, yeah, that's the major position. And then he showed me the double stop country lick, like, buddy, honky tonk women or something like that. And it all opened up. So then I could improvise. So if someone said, because I could learn a song. Like I'm probably, you know, not far off, probably a year off playing in James Rain's band, right? So I could learn a song. I'm sure you were the same when you were young. I go, all right, I'll learn the song. But I didn't always know why I was doing what I was doing.
Sure. Yep.
I didn't always know, I'm in a major key, I'm in a minor key. I don't know. I just learnt the solo.
Yep.
And just don't go anywhere else and you'll be okay. I was
Yep.
kind of hanging on for dear life. As soon as he showed me that, I was like, oh, all right. So if we're in a major key, I just got to play the same patterns up and down the neck, same shapes, but I've got to make sure they're in that position. And then now, obviously, you know, I can, you know, you go into that minor scale or the major scale and you can make it make sense. And then as I got older, I suddenly realized that, you know, Eddie Van Halen was doing this. A lot of the stuff he was doing wasn't actually right. Like there's a lot of passing notes that aren't any good.
Absolutely.
But he goes past them so quickly. And that, you know, that whole 1, 2, 4 shape that he just goes all across the whole neck.
Yep. Yep.
But he would always start on a great note and land on a great note and emphasize the great note.
Yep.
And those other notes they're passing notes. They're passable.
Yep.
But the way he did it, you go, it's the best thing that you've ever heard in your whole life.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that was his thing was bizarrely, you know, his thing's a lot about shapes. It's just like he's moving shapes around the neck. And they keep repeating in song after song after song after song. It's brilliant.
Dimebag was the same, where he would just do.
Was he?
Yeah. He'd just do a shape like maybe 1, 2, 4 right across and milk that.
Yep.
But you know, I think we're of an age where we grew up watching a lot of TV in the 70s and early 80s, where all the theme music started. You'd have your it was all orchestras playing in unison.
Yeah.
But they would have their money notes, you know, the notes of the chord that they're going to. But how they got there, they didn't just go, beep, they went
exactly
all perfectly in
totally
unison, right? So that's a
Yeah.
big sound that's in my head.
Got you.
As to, what's with the fast stuff and all that? It's just like, well, we grew up and joined that. And a lot of classical music does that as well. You know, you hear stuff played on other instruments. I think guitar is actually quite a slow instrument to coordinate the two hands together to pull off things that sax players do, or string players, you know, who just drag a bow in one hit and can just play a flurry with their left hand.
Well, a big thing that I learned that I didn't realize, like sometimes I'd hear something and I'd go, because, you know, before there was no YouTube when we were kids. So you would just go, how the hell is that guy playing that? Right. And then you suddenly realize he's only hitting the 1 out of every 3 notes or 1 out of every 4 notes. The others are hammer-ons.
Yeah.
You go, diddle 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 diddle, you know, you suddenly go diddle diddle diddle, you know, and then eventually, if you want to, you can get as fast as Simon Hospital or Yngwie Malmsteen, but I still can't. But Yngwie, he picks, like, man, that guy is just a beast. He picks almost everything, you know. It's just ridiculous.
Have you checked out that cracking the code? Have you come across that on YouTube?
No.
Oh, okay. So there is a channel. I've had him on the show a couple of years ago. Trey Grady is his name. And he has a series called Cracking the Code. He did it quite a few years ago. And it's this animated series just detailing him growing up around our era and watching all these guys and wondering how the hell are they doing that? And he breaks down all of the different greats and their approach to picking. So he looks at Yngwie. Yngwie, when he changes string, doesn't pick the last note just before he switches string, so that he's in a position to get to the next string. And then you get other guys that do, and it all comes down to pick angle. And he really breaks it down. He puts cameras on guitars and gets all these guys to come in and shows, and he slows it down how when they change string, they're changing angle so that they never get caught in between the string. And it's, because that's the big stumbling block is as you're trying to pick everything, you might end up, oh shit, I'm stuck in between the string. You got to pick it up. No, if you had had your pick at a different angle, cracking the code. That.
I'll check that out. That's something good for the listeners to check out too.
So there's little things that people show you that you go, oh man, my playing's about to go to the next level there. Now you were talking about just knowing the one shape essentially and moving it around. I did that for years. And I knew that when I jammed with guys who were taught, I was self-taught. So, hey, we're playing an A minor. Here's me playing at the 5th fret. I'm milking the crap out of it.
Of course.
Yeah. Oh, watch me jump up 12 frets and I'm up. And I'd see these
Exactly.
other guys
It was good
going
enough
all
for
around.
Chuck Berry, right?
Yeah.
Good enough for Angus Young.
Oh man, yeah, you can see through me that I know my one shape, or I could move it down 3 frets to get the major shape and everything. It wasn't until I was playing in a Queen tribute band called Killer Queen, and they're still going, and I was touring a lot with them. I would started seeing videos of myself on YouTube improvising when I'd take an extended solo, like in I Want It All or something. And I realized that as soon as I got out of that box, my safety zone, I was hitting a lot of wrong notes. And I put the ego aside and I started just saying to my friends, how do you approach the fretboard and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And do you know Dave Dwyer at all? The guitarist who used to be in 1927 years ago. Dave sent me, he wasn't the original. Dave sent me this handwritten guitar manual that he'd written. I don't know if he ever got it published or anything, but he had in there your major pentatonics and your minor pentatonics. But then he had this section on the major and minor pentatonic overlay scale where he'd lay them over the top of each other.
Yep.
Bang, light bulb moment. That's what the fuck Clapton and Stevie Ray and that do.
Yeah.
How they're not quite playing major pentatonic and they're not playing minor pentatonic. It's a combination of the two. And that was a big revelation for me.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So I was doing a lot of gigs around the place, filling in for bands who were a 3-piece, but sometimes they'd get booked as a 4-piece, and I'd come along as the second guitarist. And I know there'd be certain songs that would come up, and it'd be usually something like, an old Beatles song or the Stones, where it wasn't quite major, it wasn't quite minor, and the other guitar player would always throw to me for that solo. And I got to the point where I know why you did that, why you want me to do it. I only just learnt the remedy for that. Watch me do my major minor pentatonic overlay scale.
Nothing worse, is there? Yeah, those songs where you just go, what the hell key am I supposed to play this in?
Exactly. I still don't know if I'm playing, and I detest it, but if I'm playing with a band and they do Sweet Home Alabama, I've never been able to actually bring myself to listen to the real song because it's such overplayed. It was one of those cliches. I've always tried to avoid cliches. I should just listen to the actual song and find out. I never know what key I should be soloing in. Should I be playing a Mixolydian mode here? Should I be soloing more like I'm in the key of G? Should I be doing like a D minor blues thing? Is it a D major kind of thing? And it's not until the solo comes up, it's like, damn it, dude, you didn't listen to that song like you keep telling yourself you should, so that this doesn't happen next time. Next time's happening again and I'm in the same place.
Then you just have to slow down and just play some cool double stops and a few slow notes and have everyone go, man, you're so tasteful. And you're just going, no, I was just lost.
I'm just lost. Yeah, exactly. Hey, man, before we're talking about like going direct, and you said you're using the IRT for a bit of direct signal as well. I've got a 2 notes Captor X back there. Let's see if I can see it. That screen's out of my way. It's back there somewhere sitting on top of my amps. And that's when I had Steve Stevens on the show, I had a good chat to him for about half an hour before we went live. And I said, dude, I just saw you at River Stage recently. How's your sound? And he said to me, I'm using speaker IRs now. And he goes, I'll never go back. It just sounds amazing.
Right.
And I think he's using Captor X now, but he was using the Boss, was a tube amp expander at the time. Have you ever experimented with speaker IRs?
Only begrudgingly.
Begrudgingly, yeah?
Yeah, so, sometimes sound guys want to do it. And I don't want to make anyone, if someone believes that something's going to be great, then why shouldn't I let them try it,
Yep.
But yeah, because we did try that on a few gigs I've done and it just wasn't working. So obviously Steve's in a different position where he can have the top of the line gear and he'd be headlining and people have to make sure that he's happy, and he always pulls a great sound live. He's a brilliant guitarist.
Oh,
Did you
amazing.
see him Kings of Chaos?
Possibly. I've seen him play in a few different bands. Is that one of the cover bands that he's in?
It was with sort of. It was with Duff McKagan, Glenn Hughes, Matt Sorum.
I did see that.
It was like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I suddenly, because I was already a fan of his,
Yep.
of Steve's. Like, I remember seeing him at Festival Hall back in the day with Billy Idol in Melbourne, thinking, well, maybe this is the new guy, you know, maybe I should get into this guy, you know. And then when you know, he's brilliant with what he does with Billy. And then when I saw the Kings of Chaos thing and he's playing all the Blackmore stuff,
yep,
and I went, and playing it really well. Oh my God, it's really good. I said, this guy's even better than people realise.
Yeah.
And they already think that he's good.
Yep.
But he's, really, really good. But no, I don't, as a rule, use them. However, that the Ironheart behind you.
Yep.
That has a DI out.
Okay.
So I know that if we don't have the IRT studio head that Shane, the sound guy, loves to have everywhere with him, he'll use the DI out of that sometimes. And as far as I don't know how does that work? Has that got a cab sim? It must have a cab sim in it, right?
In the Laney head back there?
Yeah, must have.
I don't know off the top of my head, mate, so I'm not going to give you an answer on
that.
But
I know the IRT studio has cab sims in it.
Sure.
Yeah, but no, I don't. I you know, pretty clear. I just like the sound of a speaker cab.
Yeah. I'm going to just let people know that are still watching that might want to ask you some questions to drop them into the chat now, and I'll come back to them soon. But I wanted to ask you whether you wear in-ears when you're playing with all these different bands, or are you just a monitor kind of guy?
No. Yeah, I'm always monitors. I find that I did years on in-ears, and I've got multiple issues with them. The most important issue I have with them is that I feel like they damage my hearing.
Yeah.
A lot of people love them, but I find that I get this kind of, I think it's got something to, you know how you've got the nerve as well as the eardrum, you've got the nerve, and I don't know, it might be the way my ears are built or something like that. I can't ever get them quiet enough where they don't hurt where I don't have ringing ears.
Yep.
So I don't like that about them. And then I also just don't like the sort of distance it puts between me and the audience and the rest of the people on stage. And ironically, though, I do wear earplugs, but I don't have a problem feeling. I don't feel that. And then, you know, the other thing I find, which is the second biggest issue. The first is my hearing. The second is because I do have hearing loss, but I think it's largely due to you know, I've got a condition where the bone doesn't work properly. You know, the little hammer, the bone thing doesn't work properly in my ears, and I haven't got the courage to have it fixed because I'm worried they're going to screw it up. So I just put up with the fact that my hearing's not great.
Yep.
But the doctor always says to me, if you ever do that, you've got really good hearing because that problem you've got has protected your hearing. It's ironic.
Wow.
But so it's kind of weird. So if you get a tuning fork and put it on the nerve on my side of my head, it's really loud. Wow. Put it here and it's quieter. And he said it's because you've got the hearing of a 10-year-old. It's just you can't hear it because the little things aren't working. So anyway, that's just a funny little side story. But I find that a lot of people, I can't say it to everyone. I'll say it to, you know how you were talking about cruel to be kind, and sometimes you really want people to be honest with you. And I agree. However, it's not my place to say to someone, hey, I saw your gig. I can tell you're on in-ears because you're playing gently and you're singing gently You're not talking to the crowd very well. You're not projecting, and you're just up there in heaven because you've got this reverb on, and everything sounds amazing, and you're just going, oh, and you're bathing in the glory of it. It doesn't come across off stage. It's plain.
Yep.
Like it's a big problem for me as far as watching bands. It's not like it does. I don't think it's not with everyone, but I do find a lot of bands stop. They lose the intensity and the energy when they put them in, and I don't want that. So what I do basically is have a big full mix in my monitors like you would normally, like anyone normally would, and then I just put foam earplugs in so that I don't get ringing ears.
Yep.
And because I would have to do that anyway because of the snare.
Yep. And
so
cymbals.
I just go, yeah. So I just go, oh, well, I'm going to have them in anyway. So I'll just put my monitors on. It'll be like a normal gig, but I've got my earplugs in to protect my hearing.
Yep.
And I enjoy it that way. And plus then I really love being a singer in Palace of the King and, you know, the androids and stuff like that. I have empathy for the singer, right? So not every guitarist has empathy for the singer. So a lot of guitarists will be really loud and they won't have the singer in the monitors.
Yep.
And they'll complain about the singer being in the side fill, right?
Yep.
I'm the opposite. I'm like, I need that guy or that girl to be comfortable and having a good time so that I can have a career.
Yep.
Like if that person's rocking and having a great time, we're all winners.
Yep.
So I'll have John's voice or Susie's voice, Sarah's voice, Natalie's voice, crank it in my fallback in the side fill. They can have it wherever they want it. And I want them psychologically to come over to my side to have a bit of fun with me going, I can still hear myself really clearly. He's got me cranked in his wedges. It's going on in their heads.
Yep.
So they're not going, this guy doesn't care about the music or me. He's here to rock. And so I'll have a lot of vocal, kick, snare, bit of my guitar if the stage is really big. Obviously, you know, keyboards if we have any. Generally don't need Steve Belby in my fallback because he's loud.
Yeah.
Chris Becker's the same. You know, don't generally need bass. And generally there's bass in the side fill, but yeah, no, I don't like in-ears, mainly because of the hearing issues. It just messes with me. I start getting that kind of, if I wear them for a few shows, start getting a bit dizzy and it's like, they're messing with me, so I just don't wear them.
Yep. I got all the same reasons that I don't wear them that you've brought up there. There's one more, and that is that my guitar is too direct and I feel like I'm fucking up, that I'm not sitting in the pocket because it's just too immediate. You don't have that.
Too dry.
You don't have that air in between.
No, I totally get it. It's like, you know, I bet you this has happened to you, Rick, and it's kind of, I feel bad saying it and I shouldn't say it because I'm kind of sounding like it's like a little secret that us guitarists have. And I'm not insecure and I know you're not either. And we learn our shit and we rock up to the gig and we're all good, right? We're all over it. But if I get to the first gig of a tour with someone I've never played with before and the room's like a bathroom, really live sounding room, I go, excellent. This is going to be so easy because there's not going to be any really dry, in your face, like it's going to be easy. I'm not going to be paranoid. No, if I mess a little thing up, no one's going to hear it. You know, it's a cheat code, but it's like it's the best thing ever. As soon as you put those in-ears in, you're like, and it's dry. If no one's got reverb on there for you or there's no audience mics, because a lot of in-ears don't have the audience mics. By the time you do all that shit, you might as well just not have them in. But if you do all that, it helps. But then you're going, wow, I sound really dry and really direct, and I can hear every little thing I'm doing wrong, and if there is anything, and everyone else can too. And now I might just play quieter. Oh, what am I going to do? It's just the whole thing changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not cool.
Yeah,
not cool.
I've been told, a lot of the smaller gigs, I've gotten out of playing small cover gigs around town. Like we've both been doing it since we were kids, and you kind of get sick of that. You know? Play horses, play, April Sun in Cuba, and you're just like, But one of the things is that there are a lot of venues are now insisting that you don't use an amp and that you wear in-ears.
Ah, right. Yeah.
And I just won't. I won't. And a lot of it is because I want to protect what's left of my hearing. I've done that thing where I've spent, particularly back in my teens and 20s, rehearsing night after night with a drummer's cymbal right beside my left ear. And my left ear's down because of it.
All the damage gets done when you're young.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it rings like a motherfucker, my ears do, especially my left.
Yeah, right.
It's funny though, I can mix in the studio. I can mix, and I've noticed a lot of top tier mixers are drummers, ex-drummers, and you can't be a drummer and not have hearing damage. So I've been thinking lately, do we go that extra mile to make things even clear, more separated because of our hearing damage? That could be an advantage. You know, we make things sound super clear so that we can hear it clear.
That's an interesting concept. I never thought of that, because I often wonder why it doesn't reflect in the mixes. It's an interesting point you make, because I do wonder. I just think, well, I've obviously lost some frequencies.
Yep.
Even if it is from the condition, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The result's the same, right? And I think to myself, why is that? And my theory, until you've just said what you've said, because what you've just said makes more sense. My theory in the past was that perhaps it's such a gradual thing that you slowly adapt and get used to, you know, how it sounds in the car, and people saying, hey man, what have you done with my mix? It's like full of top end. Like, I don't have any problems with that. Like, I've never have anyone said to me that it's harsh. Right? Yep. You know, a lot of guys lose all their top end and then put too much top end even in their guitar sound.
Yeah.
Like, I often think to myself, why? Like, why does that happen? And maybe they've just lost more top end than we have. I don't know. I think your theory's the one. It's
could
like
be,
you just you're trying to make it sound clear as you can, and it's actually, your hearing's not as good as the other people.
Making it clearer
if you make it sound good. You know what it's like, Rick? You know the NS10s. Like, I use NS10s in a sub.
Right there. Me too. Right there.
And it was always like, you know, I'd go to someone else's studio and they'd have the KRKs or whatever, right? And they'd be like, yeah, but these sound better. I go, yeah, but it's not real. That's like my Marshall cab. You're not actually getting the real sound. You're getting color. I love that, because the color's being mic'd up with the guitar, right?
Yep.
What you're doing is listening to it on these colored speakers. And don't get me wrong, I love the carcass, and they're great when you're being creative and working through a process. But if you're going to do a final mix, you need to do your bloody Andy Wallace or your Chris Lord Alge or your Jack Joseph Puig NS10 mix, where it's hard to make it sound good. And they make it sound good on there, and then you take it in your car, and it sounds like the best thing that's ever been recorded in the universe.
Yeah.
Because they had to make it sound good on the NS10s.
Well, I think with the NS10s... It's almost
like we're doing that with our ears.
I think with the NS10s, because they're so mid-range dependent, it really sorts out getting your mid-range right, just to make things separated and pop out. I actually do have some Altec lensings just here down low as well. They're one model away from being the ones that Bob Clearmountain checks his mixes on. Like, I've read interviews with him.
Nice.
He says, I've got these speakers that used to come with the old Apple G3 speakers. I found some in a computer store. They were selling speakers, but they had them in the corner. And I was like, I know you're selling these. Can I buy those? And they said, yeah, $10. You can have them. And I check all my top end on that, my cymbals and stuff, because I want those little explosions of over the top. Which don't come through so much on the NS10s, or maybe my top end's gone enough that I do check just on those. But NS10s, as I said, I first come across you when I was working in radio, so that was NS10s. And I was in a position where I would make commercials and promos and then hear it the next day on the radio. And I could try things. Hey, what happens if I crank the 16K this much? I'd hear the next day on air and go, that was too much. Back it off some.
There you go.
All that trial and error was done on NS10s for me. So that's right. Why I'd be fucked without them, to be honest.
And it's also you exactly what you're saying there, right? Is you go, don't do that again, and so you don't do it again. And you're not even using your ears anymore. You're just going, well, don't push that frequency, because last time I did that, I remember what it sounded like. Even if I can't hear it, I know not to do it. Like
Yep.
bottom end on our NS10s, right? Before I had the sub, I never knew what the bottom end was doing.
Oh.
Occasionally I'd get in the car and I'd go, holy shit, what am I doing here?
Yep.
Because I couldn't hear it.
Yep.
I wasn't referencing it, right?
Yep.
So then, but then I learnt, before I had the sub, I just learnt what to make sure that I rolled off up below 80 on certain things, and I never boosted anything in any mastering plugins that was down there, and the bass was always too loud, and so I just started doing it so that it looked right on the screen, and then it started sounding right, and I just never went back and did it again because I knew it was not going to work.
Yeah. There are guys out there who mix club records on NS10s without a sub. And
Wow.
yeah, apparently they touch it and they can feel it. So I don't know if you ever watch Pensado's place. You know, Dave Pensado.
No.
So Dave Pensado's a top tier mix engineer, Christina Aguilera and Beyonce, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. Christ.
And he actually started a YouTube channel and a TV show, which kind of inspired me to get into all this, years ago, maybe 10 years ago, called Pensado's Place. And he'd interview all these top mix engineers, and they'd give away all their secrets and how they do things. And I was really surprised that some of these guys mix hip hop and club stuff on NS10s with no sub, but they touch it. They put their hand out and they can feel how much is too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Well, but they would have only learnt feeling how much is too much by feeling it and then referencing it and then going, okay, that's where I need it to be. And then from then on, they've got a reference point.
And a lot of these guys came up as assistants to big name guys. So they, so they would have had mentors that said, hey, this is what I'm listening for or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. I also do a lot of mixing now off my laptop speakers.
Do you?
That's helped. Yeah, I've got a MacBook Pro here. And I set my vocal levels on that because let's face it, we're spending all this time mixing to sound great on big systems. What do most people listen to? Their phone or Apple iBuds, earbuds that you've got in there. So I get my balances off my laptop speaker now, and then I've never been happy with how my mixes translate to a phone since doing that.
Got you. It's so funny that we have to mix for that now, isn't it?
It's the way crazy. It is. You know,
and Bob, speak. No, you go.
I was just going to say, back when we were kids, we had those stereos, you know, with the all the different separate power amp and blah blah blah. And long gone. Everything's
Yeah. I was going to say, when you mentioned Bob Clearmountain, he lost his house in the fires.
I know.
Poor bugger.
Yeah, that infamous studio of his, gone.
Yeah,
there'd be a lot of things gone that we don't know about in the hills of LA.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just going to scan. We had a few live viewers coming and going through there, but we've been deeply engrossed in conversation. You're very easy to talk to, mate. While I do go through there, I did put some aside. Does Tim still have that bracelet with the black beads and hearts?
Yeah, I do, yes. And thank you for it.
That's Vance Hopper. I can't
even read that. It actually wasn't that long ago. Where was the gig? I can't remember. It was at a Rogue Traders gig. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Hey, Tim, great listening to you tell these stories. Can you tell the backstory about your Silver Sparkle Bellman? Was that a custom build for you?
It was custom built for me. So I had two Bellmans built for me when I was in the Superjesus. I had the black Bellman built for me, which had a Bixby on it. I've still got them here. So both of them had Bixbys on it. So the black Bellman, beautiful guitar. So the guys at Bellman offered to do an endorsement for me, and they offered to make me a guitar that to my specs. And they built me this beautiful black Bellman. And then after that, when I started the Androids, I had them build me a silver sparkle Bellman with the 3 pickups, and it's got a piezo in it. It's could do anything in that guitar. It's got two output, 2 output jacks. So you could do acoustic. You could go acoustic down to the DI and electric to the amp. And that was, I used that one in the Watching You Rogue Traders film clip, if anyone wants to see it. Beautiful guitar. Don't think I used it in any other film clips. But I still use it. Like when the Androids supported Pink on the I'm Not Dead tour, that was my main guitar. And I remember Tony Bellman came to the gig and sent me a message after the gig saying, "Oh, I'm so glad to see that you still using the guitar. You obviously really loved it." And I was like, "Yeah, I loved it. You made it for me, and it's a brilliant guitar. It's a beautiful guitar." So that's the backstory for that one. I've still got both those Bellmans, and I'll never let them go.
Awesome. I've just, while you were talking then, found out that I can actually make my comment section bigger so I can actually read it now. I was struggling to read it that time. But I just saw another one. Where was it? Hi, Tim. Can you tell us about your Trussart Steel DeVille? When did you get it and how do you feel about it?
The Trussart is a brilliant guitar.
I don't know what that is.
James Trussart makes guitars in California, and he makes them out of steel.
Okay.
So it's polished. It's a polished metal guitar with engraving on the top of it. If anyone goes and has a look at my Instagram, you'll see there's photos all over that of that guitar with me playing it. So the story is that that also has a Bigsby on it. I don't really use the Bigsby much, but I love the twang it gives the guitar. It's just extra bit of metal and the way the strings are wound on it. I don't know, whatever it is, it sounds good. And they look great. But this Trussart that I have is brilliant guitar. So the way it came about, it's not my guitar. It's Jon Stevens' guitar. So when I got asked to join Jon's band, I got to the first rehearsal and he said, "I've got some guitars. Do you want me to bring some along and you might want to play one of them?" I said, "I've got guitars." And he said, no, I've got them. They're just at home not doing anything. "Oh, I reckon you should use one of them." And I said, "Oh, great. I'd love to see them." So he bought he's got 2 Trussarts. He had a whole heap of these brilliant boutique guitars. And I walk in with my, I've got my Les Paul and my Strat, and I'm pretty happy with my sound. And he said, "Just any guitar you want to use, you just try them out." And I picked that Trussart up and played it, and I just went, "Wow, this thing's amazing, and it looks incredible." So I just said, "Oh, use this, if that's all right." And, I felt a bit kind of weird about it. He said, "Nah, man, you got to use it." So now it's become this thing where if I don't use it, he's like, "Where's the Trussart? What are you doing? Why aren't you using the guitar?" Because he loves it. It's a beautiful looking piece. He used to have it hanging on his wall like a piece of art, But it's a great sounding guitar. I had someone ring me the other day saying that, there are some orders coming in for Trussart guitars in Australia for people who want to get that guitar because I'm playing it and they've seen me and heard me playing it, which is brilliant. But they're handmade, beautiful pieces of art, and Jon won't sell it to me. I've asked him constantly, "Will you sell me that guitar?"
Yeah.
But no, you just hang on to it and use it for as long as you want, but I'm not selling it. And I'm like, damn. So it's got this whole backstory to it where it was Dorian, who was the original owner, and then Josh from James Rain's band was the next owner, and then Jon bought it from him, and then I'm now using it, and everyone thinks it's my guitar, but it's Jon's guitar, and it's beautiful.
Wow. Cool. Now, just looking at the comments there, mate, there is this uber fan of all the guitar YouTubers out there, and his name is Poo Ninja. I went to an event years ago, and everyone was like, "Oh, the guy that picked me up in Germany was wearing this shirt that said, 'I love Poo Ninja.'" And he's been in there watching, but he's just said that been a great chat. He'll catch the rest in repost.
Awesome.
Mr. Ninja, when you do watch this, where are you based, man? Because I'm pretty sure you're in Germany, and when I look at the translation of time, you're always watching my show live, but I'm guessing it's 3 or 4 a.m. when you do. So just drop me a comment later, man. I want to know where the mystical poo ninja is from. But
I love it.
I want to ask you about picks and strings. That's one thing we didn't touch on. What type of strings, gauge, etc., and whether you've experimented much with different kinds of picks and their effect on tone and playability.
Yeah, I changed my mind a lot with, not a lot, I changed my mind over time with picks. I used to use, when I was younger, I just used to use heavy, like Jim Dunlop heavy.
Yep.
Which is basically the same as Angus, same as Eric Clapton. And then I started really working on my right hand tremolo picking and found that the light pick, like Eddie used for a while, they're really great for that.
Yep.
And just from a practical perspective, I used to break less strings.
Yep.
So then I started using the green Tortex. And ironically, I used them for a long time, but I used to break a lot of strings. I'd be on tour with James back in the day, and there'd be 4 guitars restrung before the gig, and then 4 changes because of broken strings.
Wow,
it's craziness.
Yep.
Because I was hitting it. What was happening was I was a young, fiery guitarist, just like you were back then, Rick, and being told to turn down all the time. So I'd get to a point where it wasn't really loud enough for me.
Yep.
And I was hitting it harder than I'd realised. You know how when drummers put earplugs in, they start hitting the cymbals too hard?
Yeah. Yep.
I think I was digging in too hard and I was breaking a lot of strings. But the reason why I moved away from those is, and it happens to me again to this day, I don't have any arthritis problems or anything, but if I use the green Tortex picks, they're supposed to be more grippy, right? They won't slip out of your hand. But there's something about them. I don't know if I'm fiddling with them or if I'm moving them. I'm moving them around. Either way, I don't know why. I'm moving them around so much, fiddling with them, that my thumb starts aching.
Oh, wow.
And so if I don't use those picks, I don't get the ache.
Interesting.
So, because I started thinking, I must be getting a little bit of mild arthritis. Hope it doesn't get worse because I need to pay the bills.
Yep.
And I love playing guitar. And then I went, I wonder if it's these picks, because I noticed I was fidgeting with it. And then I got rid of those picks and the pain went away. So weird. I was on a James tour. It was with Brett Kingman. Brett Kingman and I were both playing guitar with James on this tour. And I said to him, I've got this pain. Have you ever had that? He said, no. He goes, I hope it's not arthritis. I go, so do I. Anyway, I got rid of the green picks and went back to Dunlop heavies again, and problem solved. It's fine. And I never have them slip out of my hand.
Yeah.
Touch wood. I don't have that. I feel like they're almost more stuck to my fingers. Or another theory could be, while I'm just thinking about it here, is that I'm jiggling them around, but because there's no resistance. With the Tortex, there's a resistance.
Yep.
It's sort of harder to move them.
Yep.
Whereas there's the Dunlop heavies, no problem. I don't know what it is, but either way, I've used Dunlop heavies for a long time now, and I might use the nylon ones, ideally the 88s for acoustic.
Yep.
Or I might use the 7.3s for recording acoustics, because the light picks for recording, I'm actually going to do some of that soon.
Yep.
Recording acoustics with the light pick, as you know, sounds better and it's less percussive.
Yep.
Sounds more like a shaker.
Sure. It's funny you say that, because
that Jeff Buckley thing,
Yeah. I do approach acoustic guitars in the studio as being like a percussion instrument, more like a shaker.
Yeah.
It gets that rhythm, that thing going on there.
Yeah, and there's like a tone, like almost like a faint tone in the background, but it's, the shaker thing goes on.
Yeah, yeah.
Strings, I've evolved with strings. I used to use, back when I was younger, I used to use the Dean Markley strings, because that's what Angus Young used. And then when I found out that Stevie Ray Vaughan and Diesel were using 12 to 56, I started using 12 to 56. And then as I got older, but I didn't have the wound, I had the plain G.
Yep.
So I used to have to put a set together. we'd buy the plain 20. So it was like, 16, 18, 20, and then 32, 42, 52. I progressed after 36, 40, or 32. Anyway, it was the 56. But I was just like, this is ridiculous. So I started using 12 to 52. And I used that for a long time, probably 20 years. And then one day I read an article on Stevie Ray Vaughan and that he went to lighter, not crazy light, but lighter strings as he got older.
Yep.
Probably as he was taking less stimulants, he suddenly realised it was hurting his hands.
Yeah.
And I thought, why am I making my life harder than it needs to be? Because the tone's still good. The strings are a bit lighter. And I found this Jeff Healey set of DRs. I think it was DRs. He used to have a Jeff Healey set, which was 10 to 52. And Jeff used to have the guitar on his lap and he used to bend those bends was crazy bends.
Yeah.
I used to love doing that. I had to get used to not over bending because of the the strings being lighter.
Yep.
But I was using those for a long time, and then I started having trouble with those strings, and went to now I'm using the Jim Dunlop 11 to 52 set.
Okay.
Which are great.
Yep.
I love them. So they're brilliant. I just chuck a set of them on and my Jim Dunlop heavy pick and I'm away.
Yep.
Very rarely break one.
Yep. It's funny. I was always a 10 to 52 guy, tuned down a half step in the 90s. Everyone was doing it.
Yep.
Then I was using 10s at standard tuning, and I said yes to too many cover bands years ago and ended up getting RSI in my hand. So I dropped down to 8s for a while and thought, this is going to suck my tone. Nah, it didn't. That's when I realized the whole heavy string thing was a myth. I just had to watch how I hit it, that it didn't go sharp when I hit them, and just not to overbend, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get used to it. But it's the same as like that John's Trussart guitar. I kept overbending.
Yep.
When I first started playing the guitar in rehearsal. And I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with you, man? Like, why are you overbending? And just got frustrated with myself. Like, this is not good enough. Like, you're better than that. I was doing those conversations in my head.
Yeah.
And then I got used to it. I thought, it's just a different guitar. I'll get used to it. And then after months of playing this guitar and got used to it, because I kept saying to the guitar tech, are you putting light strings on my guitar? What's going on?
Yeah.
And he thought, no, I'm putting your strings on. All right. And anyway, one day I bump into Josh Owen at a James Rain gig where James and John were playing on the same gig. And he said, how do you feel about, how's the guitar feeling? I said, it's great, And then he said, how do you like the stainless steel frets? And I was like, what? And he said, oh yeah, I put stainless steel frets on that guitar. I said, is that why it's so slinky? He said, yeah, it's slinky. It's great, isn't it? I go, no, it's not. It's not great. I've been having to get used to not overbending because of those bloody stainless steel frets. Now it's not a problem.
Wow.
But I didn't realize that's what was going on with stainless steel frets. I didn't realize why guys liked them, for starters.
Yeah, I would never have thought of that.
Nah, it is just slinky. It's just like slides along the string easier.
Yep.
The string slides along the fret easier.
Yeah. Would never have thought of that.
Craziness.
I got 2 more questions for you, because I'm sure you got better things to do than talk to me all day on your day off.
No.
One was, did you ever get any feedback back from Madonna on your I'd Rather Do It With Madonna song? Was there ever any feedback from her?
Yeah, there was. It was funny because it was a shame. We played, because we had a hit song in London or in England, in the UK, at the same time she had a hit song. We were, and as you may or may not know, and your listeners may or may not know, if you have a hit back then, it doesn't exist anymore, but back then if you had a hit song in the UK, you were on the TV show called Top of the Pops, which was like their countdown. Classic, iconic TV show. I was on there with the Rogue Traders and the Androids.
Nice.
So I'm very, very proud of that.
Yep.
But it was a case of her having a hit and us having a hit same week. So we were on the show the same night, right?
That's awesome.
So we're thinking, this is going to be amazing. We're going to get to meet her and chat to her. She did a pre-record, so we didn't get to meet her.
Damn.
So, but the TV audience didn't know that. So they did this whole skit about us walking around the building trying to find her, and we can't find her. And anyway, but putting that to one side, sadly, before that, as soon as the song was a hit song, we received a message from her manager, never directly from her.
Yeah.
And it was instigated by them. It wasn't instigated by us. We didn't ask for her to respond, but she sent a message through her manager just saying that she was flattered and thank you very much for the thought, and she loved the song. So it was very nice.
Classic. That's great.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to find out, and this is just something for anybody who's aspiring to be a gun for hire like you have made a great career out of. What other things that matter? Why do you think people get hired repeatedly, man?
Well, as you and I both know, we're in the same position, right? I know there's a lot involved, but the one key point is you have to be able to play the music. A lot of people say, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yep.
Just total bullshit.
Yep.
It's what you know first. You have to be good.
Yep.
You don't have to be the best, but you've got to be good.
Yep.
And you've got to learn it, and you've got to put the work in. So if you've done that, then who you know counts. So if you know how to play and how to play well, and you're professional, and then you're really good, and someone sees you, they go, man, you're good. And if you're a dickhead, they go, but I don't care, he's good. And they walk away.
Yep.
Whereas if you're really good and they see you and they go, hey, man, you're great. You go, thanks. And then suddenly the guy goes, I'm a Kiss fan. I go, so am I. And then whatever. You just be a good person in life. I tell people all the time, tell younger people, tell my kids, if you be a good person in life, things work out generally. It's like, don't be cynical. Just be a good person and things generally work out. And if things don't work out for you in one band or one job or one career move or one relationship, it doesn't mean you were doing the wrong thing being a good person or a nice person. It just means it didn't work out. This is the world we live in, right? Yep. Thank God we don't live in Serengeti. We're not getting eaten by lions, right? Because that could have been us, 100,000 years ago, but it's not now, right? Probably not you and I, because we've evolved well past the beautiful brown skin to have lighter skin now. But anyway, I'm going off on a whole tangent now. The most important thing is you have to know how to do it, right? Then it's who you know. And then you've just got to show up on time. You've got to be a nice person. Or don't pretend to be a nice person. Just actually be a nice person. And be good to be around. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Don't get in people's faces. All those things. What can you help? What can you do to help? If you're on tour, right? Everyone drinks except me. I don't drink. I've grown up my whole life as a diabetic. So I just look after my health. And alcohol's got sugar in it. And I want to look after my health. I want to live as long as I can. I'm not trying to live to 100, but I'd like to live a normal lifespan. So I look after my health, right? So I don't drink. So guess what? I'll drive the car. Everyone can get as pissed as they want. I'll drive the car. No stress.
Yep.
I don't complain because I've got nothing to complain about. I love doing it. Yep. I love helping them out. And I also love driving. It's little things like that where you go, all right, he's professional. He shows up on time. He's good to be around. He knows the songs and he plays well. And he drives all the drunk bastards home at the end of the night. God, you know what I'm saying? You just got to do it. You help. You try and help and do what you can to help the team achieve what they want to achieve and be successful. And the more everyone does that, the more successful the team will be,
Awesome, man. I'm going to throw one more thing in there because I'm a non-drinker as well. But another thing is non-smoker, like cigarette smokers. When you got to travel, nothing worse than having a where's Johnny? Oh, he's off having a smoke, mate. We're about to board the bloody plane, and they will fight tooth and nail to get that cigarette in and stuff. And But Tim, it's been.
I'm a non-smoker as well.
Yep.
By the way, on the smoking, and there are people. No one's allowed to smoke in the car when we're driving.
Yeah.
And no one would.
Yep.
And so that's fine. But it'll be can we pull over for a smoko up here? And I go, yeah, no worries. It's like you don't want to be a pain in the ass. But everyone, this is where the brilliant musician who's a good guy, who smokes, but is also really professional and trying to help the team, goes, right, I'll get to the airport a little bit early. I'll check in. I'm going to have a ciggy, boys, while you check in. No worries, mate. Out the front of the airport to the smoking area, have your smoke. Comes back in. No one's waiting around worried about where he is. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like we all need to take responsibility for ourselves, whether it's smoking, drinking, or not. It can be whatever you want it to be. But you've got to just do what you can for the team. Because we're like a little bloody, army traveling through towns. Everyone needs to look after each other and have each other's backs.
Yeah.
And not everyone does that. A lot of people, you can't be self-obsessed and in your own little world, and you've got to think about the whole team, and those people, if you look at all the successful musicians around the world, I betcha they are all those people, the ones that have, for the team. Yeah. I'm talking about the hired guns primarily, because obviously people in bands, you be as much of an arsehole as you want to be. If you're, the biggest bloody rock star in the world, it's not. It's going to make everyone's life hard and miserable, but it's not going to affect the success of the business. Although you might be an even bigger rock star if you were a good guy to be around. But it takes all kinds to run the world, doesn't it, Rick? As we've discussed already.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw one more thing in there that's very overlooked, and that is being a good rhythm guitarist. Because let's face it, 95% of the time you're playing rhythm guitar, and I know a lot of guys who can totally out-shred me.
Yep.
And then I hear them play rhythm, and I think, wow, dude, you're a terrible rhythm player.
Yeah, quite common. It's because they didn't practice enough AC/DC songs when they were growing up, Rick.
You betcha. It's all about Malcolm.
You do that. You're home and hosed. That's all you got to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And none of this down, up bullshit. You got to play those eights all down. You ever seen Bob Spencer play eights down, all downstrokes?
Yes, I've had Bob on, and we've talked about his rhythm playing, and to me, he's one of those.
Mate.
Yeah.
He's unbelievable.
He is absolutely an amazing rhythm player. I actually remember him saying that he hits all the strings at once, and he uses parts of his left hand to mute the strings that he's not doesn't want it to be a part of the chord, etc. And
becomes more percussive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm doing the same thing, and that's the biggest compliment people can give me is, mate, it's not your soloing. The song just sounds better when you play it. And I know it's because I care about rhythm guitar.
Yeah, and that thing that Bob's saying about hitting all the strings.
Yep.
Even in solos, Eddie would do that. Like he'll go brang, like across the strings, but only the last note will be the note he's going for.
Yep.
But he's not just going, he's going bring. Sounds unbelievable, and you don't realize it.
Yep.
It's like someone's, like if you're making a record and you have a snare track and then you duplicate it and distort it.
Yep.
And you get this crunch, like a along with the snare, right?
Yep.
But it's not a sample, it's just distorted. It's the another heat in the as well as the note.
Yep.
And the note is the snare, but the is all the other strings.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And that's almost that thing that I was talking about, us hearing all those theme songs in the 80s where there was that flurry of notes leading up to the money note. But that can be noise as well, can't it? Just
cool. Of course it can.
It really brings out that money note that you're shooting towards there.
Yeah, totally. Make it count more.
Yeah. Mate, I want to thank you for your time. That audio thing that we had before of it fading in and out was happening to start off with, but it come good. I actually think it's just shared internet in my house, and my flatmate went out while we were doing it, and it come good. So that's what it is. I know that now.
Hopefully the listeners weren't frustrated by it.
Yeah, no, I was worried that some of the listeners might be put off by that, but it came good, mate. And as I said to you, I would have been happy to get an hour out of you, but here we are pushing 3 hours, which seems to be
Nice.
the magic number when I get
That's great.
the good players
That's all
on there.
about
So
you, mate.
thank you so much for your time. Thanks to everybody that listened in. Looking at my little controller to find the right button to bring up my little logo and say adios, amigos. Thank you, Tim. See you, mate.
Thanks, Rick. Bye, mate.